Hello, guys and girls, and welcome to episode 154 of the F.Reality Podcast. Plug in your neural link, relax, and let us zap your brain with this week's top VR news. We're going to be talking about Facebook Connect, the show formerly known as Oculus Connect. We get a closer look at Facebook Horizon and Medal of Honor Above and Beyond. I'll give you the details on an interesting new partnership with Qualcomm and Ultralink. We're going to have a deep dive discussion with our guest Denny on all things VR and Cloudhead Games. And finally, Zim has got some new releases for you to look forward to next week. But for now, let me introduce you to the team and find out what's been their highlight of the week this week. And also let us know what you played in the chat so we can read out some of your highlights too. First up to the plate, this guy's new best friend is a smoky creature only known as Mr. Friendly. It's the one and only VR Screamer, Zimtok5. How are you?
You do such poetry with those intros, Mike. I'm good. I am feckin' sore, and that's all Denny's fault. It's been a good week. I've been questing a lot, and for this week I was like, you know what, last week was kind of paternity week 1, and it was, you know, being a zombie with the kid, and this week's like coming back to humanity again. I was like, feck it, I'm gonna do myself some quest time. So last evening I did a quest disco. So after having done kind of Beat Saber and Pistol Whip and stuff like that the night before, I was a bit too sore, and then I went and I took a strobe light, and I was like, okay, how far can we push the quest cameras? And so I did that. I set up a room, my biggest room scale room that I have in the house, and used a flashing disco ball basically that does kind of a strobing effect like this. And played really with just that and very little other light. And I was really surprised that the tracking didn't go all fecky. It actually worked very well. I was able to play onward competitively and get some really good shots in. So that was my kind of test for the week, I suppose. And I guess we'll count that as a highlight. Although my true highlight has to be, I'm sure someone else is going to highlight the devouring, but I thought I'd let someone else speak to that.
Nice. Yeah, I saw pictures of you crawling on, like, prone on the floor. I guess that was playing Onward, right?
Yeah, I gotta tell you one thing. Like, what is under your feet counts so much. Some people use, like, foam padding and stuff like that. We get milk delivered, like, we get it from, like, straight from a dairy farm. And so we get this, like, wool layer that they use for cooling it. We pull that out of the bags or whatever. I tell you, stepping on wool's like stepping on a mossy forest. It is amazing. So lying and rolling down in that and, like, playing an FPS is just a dream come true, like, for this kind of man. Absolutely dream. Yeah.
So your family just needs to, like, drink more and more milk so you can cover your entire, like, floor and that kind of stuff?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Although the worst part is my dog loves it. She rips it into a million pieces. It goes everywhere. So it's only in a cordoned off, locked off room back there. Yeah.
Nice. Sounds like you've been having fun anyway.
Yeah.
So next up, although this guy doesn't play nice with others, we've managed to tame him over the years to play nice with us. It's our resident angry man. It's Rowdy VR. How you doing?
I'm doing all right, yeah. Except for my computer, since apparently it's still not up and running. I need to order still a new processor. I think my processor is not compatible with the motherboard, so it's a bit of a downer. I'm gonna have to wait a bit longer up until I have some money to order, like, a new processor. But on the upside of things, I do have a highlight, save for hearing you guys scream through an entire 5 hours of playing The Devouring, which was a pretty high highlight as well. But I think the highlight from my week was two episodes that I watched. One was High Score on Netflix. I started watching that, which is kind of like the history about, you know, gaming in general, and a little bit more like the politics behind it as well. I don't really have an opinion yet on, like, whether I find it really good, because I've only seen 2 episodes, which is the one where the main topic is Atari, and the second one is the main topic mostly Nintendo. So I've seen those 2 episodes, but I did enjoy those 2 a lot, to see, you know, like how everything got started and how much progress we've had since the beginning, which is kind of insane to think about, because the time span is actually not that long considering, you know, the time that we've been playing games. And then the second thing was that I also watched the Neuralink presentation that some of you watched as well, with Elon Musk. That was fun to watch.
Are you gonna get chipped, Rowdy? I want to know. I watched that, man. Are you gonna get chipped? You get the coin?
The problem that I had, and I said it in the chat as well, I think, is that there's so little science involved yet with the entire presentation that they gave. It was just a kind of showing 3 pigs that had a chip implanted and then the chip removed, and they were still fine. But that's not the point of having a chip implanted. You know, if you implant a chip, it needs to do something specific. They did show like some recordings from the olfactory bulb, which is nice, but that is something that's been done like maybe 40 years ago. I don't know how long. So I didn't find that very interesting. What I do find very interesting is the size of it. It's very small. I think that is really interesting, but I think that is also a little bit the problem with it, because the smaller you make a device, the harder it will be to insert it in a specific area. And the comparison was made with, for example, deep brain stimulation, which is a technique that stimulates the deep brain, like for example regions like the nucleus accumbens or the cauda putamen, amygdala, you know, those kind of regions which are very deeply located in the brain and are involved in a lot of circuitry. But all of the regions that you target with the Neuralink so far, or what they're talking about, they're all motor cortex, somatosensory, all cortical regions. So I would like to see how something as fine as those wires that they're using will actually be able to reach deeper regions, especially if they talk about, you know, memory and long-term potentiation, which is hippocampus and long and short-term memory. But I don't see that happening yet when the wires are so fine, because you can't target them in a specific area. So for my humble opinion on the technology, that will likely be very impressive later on. But I would like for Elon to maybe delegate those presentations to someone who has like more of the scientific background or a biological background, because I think it's approached too much from an engineering problem rather than a biological engineering problem. And there's a huge difference between those two, because with engineering you go from A to B, and you know that is the part that you do. But with biological engineering, biology goes from A to Z, and all those B, C, D, all those other letters in between, and maybe a billion others, are all like steps that have some kind of minor little influence, and they influence other regions and regions and regions and regions. So it gets so complex then that I would like to hear a little bit more, instead of like, oh yeah, we're going to be able to telepathically call or Tesla over. Talk a little bit more about the science behind it. I think that would be great.
No.
I think, you know, from the 2 recommendations, like I also watched High Score as well, and I thought, you know, sometime in the future there's going to be people making documentaries like that about VR and how it all started, and that's going to be super interesting to see that.
And we probably have a guest on there who's probably going to be featured in that show, because I have
Denny
to say,
will be on
Denny,
there for sure.
You're a huge example for me. You're the first one that I saw ever trying virtual reality with your Sixth Sense kind of stuff. I was so impressed by that. I didn't place the pre-order on the Sixth Sense because it was too late and I had no money, like always. But I was definitely gonna get it once I got paid. Like.
Yeah. And then the other thing that you mentioned about the Neuralink thing, I also watched it, and what kind of worried me was a bit like that when people start adopting this technology, that it won't be a fair playing ground, a playing field anymore, and that people will have a distinct advantage over others that will maybe even force people to go out and buy this just so it can be fair amongst everyone.
But that is, again, like the problem that I have with like Elon doing the presentation, because Elon, that is the kind of future that he, you know, sees. You know, he wants to use it for improvement of people. Well, I see this kind of technology far more being used for people with, for example, spinal injuries, with blindness, hearing disorders, those kind of things. Focus on that group, because that is the group that will be targeted in the beginning from this. People with a spinal cord injury. I don't think that anyone or any government would allow like some kind of like implant to make superhumans, and that would not be regulated at a governmental level. I don't see that happening, especially not with like things like the FDA approvals, and it's so complex to do something like that. But focus on the positive.
I think there are just 2 films you need to watch after you watch the Neuralink presentation.
Here we go.
Gattaca and Upload. Just watch those 2 films, and then I think you'll have a slightly different vision of maybe that future.
Upload was the TV show, right? Rather than a film?
No.
There's a film Upload.
Okay. Sorry, Upgrade. Sorry, Upgrade.
Oh, I've seen that film. Yeah, I've seen that film.
I've seen it.
Cool
Upgrades.
Yeah.
There's definitely a future there where cracking open our heads and exposing it to a computer framework it's unavoidable. It's actually unavoidable. It's part of our evolution if we don't destroy ourselves first. Even Palmer Luckey used to go on and on about all of that kind of stuff, and you know, the best simulations are going to be the ones that happen once we've directly connected to our heads.
There you go.
I completely agree with that. But I think as a first step, we need to focus on healthcare rather than improvement. I'm not saying that it won't happen. It definitely will happen in a future from now. But I think from now that it's still a lot of future talk. And I know Elon is a visionary and he has visionary talks. But I think from a scientific point, I think it's important to get like the science right from the beginning, that people know what to expect.
That's what's going to happen first, though. Elon is a salesman first and foremost on every single company he works with and for. So right now he's doing a big song and dance for investors is really what he's doing. But really the scientists behind the scenes are actually doing the hard work and going, okay, we're going to tackle blindness and paralysis and that kind of stuff. So that will be first.
I love that he quoted that it was like Black Mirror. He actually said that in his presentation. And he also said that the future is going to be weird in his presentation, which I loved as well.
He also said he might be wearing a Neuralink himself.
That's true. He did say that, actually. Yeah, that's very good. But yeah, I did enjoy it. So go check it out if you're interested in Neuralink. But some good suggestions there, Rowdy. So next up, this guy is a true VR veteran. He earned the Medal of Honor over 6 years ago, actually, on the original Oculus Rift DK1. It's, of course, our Frisian friend. It's Nathie. How are you?
Oh, God. Yeah, no, that was something, right? Like, guys, imagine that you had to just, use like a 3D injector to play Medal of Honor, to be able to enjoy it in VR.
Yeah, it was Medal of Honor Airborne, right?
Yeah, true.
2007 edition.
Yeah, right. Yeah. No, that was the one I owned back then. I was like, let's try. But yeah, now we're getting a full fledged game. We're soon gonna talk about it, anyways.
Yes.
But yeah, maybe I should be the one that highlights this crazy VR jet trip that we had.
Yeah, go for it. And I can chip in with. We can all chip in with our thoughts. Absolutely, go for it.
So, Zim invited me, Mike, and also Rowdy to check out this horror adventure, and I was first like, I don't know. I was just waiting for Mike or Rowdy to say like, maybe we can't do it now. I was like, but then they said, oh yes, or yeah, you guys all said yes. I was like, oh screw it, now I need to do it too. So then we played it, and it was pretty scary actually, but also a lot of fun. It was. So we played it for like 4 or 5 hours. It's like this escape experience. Within VR chat, it's like a world that you can jump into. It's totally free. You can play it with up to 4 people. You can also play it alone or with 2. Totally depends on what you're into. And the basic story is you drive on the highway with like your friends, and then something chases you in the dark and then destroys your whole car, and then you crash, and then you wake up in this creepy haunted mansion that reminded me a little bit of that funny Disney movie and that ride that I have once been on. From there it's like reading notes, finding clues, and trying to get out of that place, because there is like this shadowy thing that lurks around that wants to eat you alive. But it was amazing, and not only because it was, I kept on hearing Zim saying like, man, this is next level. I can't believe we're still playing VR chat, right? But you need to know that like the last 2 weeks, it has been pretty hectic. It has not been the most exciting 2 weeks either, So being able to then play this and enjoy VR in that way we always did, and then get to experience it, was just so much fun. I was like, this is why, we're so invested into VR. I just had that, I forgot about everything else that is going on in the world. I was just playing some scary shit with you guys.
Yeah, and I think the fact that we did it together like made the experience like 10 times better. You could complete this on your own, but doing it with friends is going to be way more fun, because like Nathie said, it's a nice mix of like horror, puzzles, room escape, and just good old-fashioned teamwork, because we had to work as a team to solve a lot of these puzzles and and overcome a lot of the challenges that we faced. And we won't spoil anything, because I think you should really go and check it out yourself. One thing to note, though, and be warned of, is that you can't stop halfway through and then carry on another day. You need to do it in one go with your team together. And like Nathie said it, go on.
Also, it's not available on Quest, since that was my problem. I couldn't join since my PC is still in lockdown. But I mean, I did watch you guys play, and I got, like Paradise Decay said in chat, I got him in trouble because I was playing sound effects through Discord.
He was trolling us through Discord. Yeah, he was. So yeah, you need to be warned that you're going to be in it for the long haul. And I think, we hit a bit of a wall at 3 hours in and was like, I don't know if we can go any longer. And then we finally cracked one of the puzzles, with some help from the developers. Thank you, developers. And then we pushed through to the end. And I'm so glad we did, because that finale, that last hour and a half of gameplay was really stand out and some of the best parts of the game that we experienced, in my opinion. So yeah, I would definitely recommend checking out The Devouring. It's in VR chat. It's completely free to play as well, which is pretty incredible. So shout out to the creators, Lakuza, I think he was actually in the chat today as well. Legends, Fiona and Cyan Laser, because I think they did a great job with the game. And the thing is, I look forward to seeing more experiences like this now that we know that this is kind of possible in VR chat, and encourage other people to, try and put something similar together that we can experience as well.
I mean, they filled up a part of like the huge gap of like almost no multiplayer or co-op experiences in VR. So this was just such a refreshing thing to do, even that we played VR chat so many times before. It's like, I want to be able to, have my own avatar and then jump into a game and then be able to invite my friends and play a 5-hour story title. This is so much potential. I just don't understand why no one is really jumping.
I also think that, after this, I went and I got in kind of like a rec room and VR chat kind of bonanza and was doing all these different things. And one of the things with horror as a genre in particular that I felt like The Devouring did particularly well is its atmospheric horror. And that's not to say that, there aren't scary elements that are actually quite thrilling. There are, and I won't say what those are. But there aren't, there aren't kind of flash in your face, loud noise jump scares. But the puzzles, so it really is like a horror room escape, which I didn't realize that there was going to be as much of a puzzle element there as there was. And one of the cool parts is once you've beaten the game and you've gotten through it, they've actually got a dedicated environment at the end with like all these placards of how long people took. Some people taking like 23 hours or whatever. Obviously they went to bed, got up and did it again. But then there's others like world runs, the fastest world run or whatever is like 31 minutes in VR, which is just incredible, because I think if we didn't have the little kind of pushes from the dev team, I think we would have been going for 6 hours. It was, some of those puzzles are kind of damn hard. They aren't unfair, but it was just such a polished example. And even like the first scenes that you get in, it's like, wow, this is VR chat. That's pretty impressive, Well,
especially because the community is making it. It's like the community who does it pretty much for a hobby can pull something off as amazing as a dev studio with like 20 people on a team.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's also something that could only happen in VR chat, because as a developer, I'm all too aware of the active user base. Just it typically isn't there for multiplayer games. We have like 6 different projects that we desperately wanted to launch, but they all were multiplayer, and they don't. They're starting to suit current market, but they just didn't before. For example, we were trying to get the Ghostbusters license for a long time.
Wow.
To do, because how much fun would that be as a multiplayer VR experience?
Amazing.
Yeah, it would be incredible. So, but just a bunch of stuff like that. So it's cool to hear that that's actually happening in VR chat at scale in there, where users can actually use tools to make that kind of stuff. It's neat.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to go and check it out yourself, it's free. Just search for The Devouring in VR chat and just go into the world with your team. It's completely free. And like I say, just make sure you've got like 4 to 5 hours spare to go through it. And if you're in there, send our regards to Mr. Friendly, who we nicknamed the creature in the game. So
I do have to say, it was very cozy to sit in this closet together with you guys and then looking at each other in like fears, like shh. Don't say anything.
It's so nice because you can handle the fear so much better. Like in Alien Isolation, if I could hug Neo, which was Nathan in this case, I think I would have felt a little bit better, than getting digested by a Xenomorph.
That's a good point, actually. If you want to get a taste of what the gameplay's like, go and check out Zim's live stream. There's a complete 4.5, 5-hour VOD on his YouTube channel, so go and check it out if you want to see what it's all about. So Next up, our special guest this week, a man that managed to get us all into bass-loving pistol whippers, is of course Denny Unger from Cloudhead Games. Welcome to the show. Pleasure to have you on here.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. I haven't had time to play a lot because we've been hard at work getting the last update out on Pistol Whip and future ones. So Heartbreaker came out recently with three songs, 3 scenes as we call them. And it's kind of a departure. They're very kind of dancey. It's kind of bubbly, poppy, summertime music, and we even did a squirt gun that comes with it, and just decided to do a tone shift to kind of give everybody a much needed break in the world and some escapism. Anyways, great reception so far, and it's been fun seeing the team work on that. They totally kicked all kinds of ass.
Nice. And like, we've seen historically in the past, like Beat Saber mappers have then been brought into the team to create maps going forward. Is that something you're still keeping in-house, or have you ended up sort of recruited community members or anything like that?
So Cloudhead grew quite a bit over the last few months. It's a really weird thing because COVID hit, and we were also having kind of the most success we'd ever had as a studio. So we went from we were 12 people to 25 people in a really short time span. So all of it's being done in-house is the short answer to that. But that does not mean there's not things being talked about for future. We have some really interesting stuff to talk about very soon that people are going to be pretty blown away by, I think, because I can't say anything. I'm trying to think of what I can say. But specific to Pistol Whip, there are going to be some things happening to the game that people will go, oh, of course. Like, it's just stuff that makes all kinds of sense when you see it, and they'll be really excited to see it.
Awesome. And we won't be having to wait too long for these announcements?
No, it's very soon.
Nice.
Yeah.
I love very soon. Very soon is like my favorite. I mean, there's very soon. There's soon. There's
I'll say next month. How about that?
Yeah, that's good. That ties in with a few other things.
Don't make it a Oculus Quest soon, because that's like a total different.
Yeah. So I haven't been playing a lot, but I do want to do a couple call outs. One is Eye of the Temple. I have not played it yet, okay? But I've been watching its development the whole time. You guys have probably tried it or touched on it.
Yeah, I played on it. Really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe you already talked about it, but what I just wanted to say, what I really appreciate about what he's done, what they've done, is the way that they're involving your body in a volumetric space, but specifically how they're kind of shuttling you around in the space and engaging more of what's happening on the ground, because that's something we talk about a lot in design at the studio, and this is the first time I've seen somebody kind of go, yeah, we could push it here and there, and it looks great. I can't wait to play it. How was it?
Oh, I loved it. Yeah, I thought it was great, and I actually made a video of it on the channel, playing it, and yeah, like you said, it's one of those rare games that really utilizes the room scale experience to the maximum. And if you've got the play space for it, I would highly recommend checking it out. There's a free demo, so there's no reason not to, called First Steps. It's available on Steam now. But yeah, I just thought it was amazing, and I thought it was definitely worth sharing, and that's why I made a video about it.
And that room scale aspect is something that I think is, we all got very excited when the Vive first kind of came out with its technology. And it has been, in my opinion, underutilized. I don't know what drives that particularly, but I think the min spec has maybe challenged where VR could have spread its wings a bit. Because everyone kind of designs around that min spec, so everyone can play it, you maximize your base. But when there are examples of that use it very well, because you get your body involved, it feels very human, and hence the immersion meter goes from there to there. It definitely goes up a notch.
I can say, from our perspective, this whole thing shifted. So when we did Call of the Starseed, it was very much grounded in doing room scale interaction, and the way we built the volume and everything was to force you to move within that spatial volume.
Yeah.
And to walk to the desk, to walk over and look under the thing. It was to force that kind of behavior. And then somewhere after that, the community at large kept screaming about wanting stick move. It was like this, and the VR community is very, very loud and very boisterous. And so a lot of studios, a lot of developers said, okay, we're going to do stick move. And the second they did that, room scale disappeared practically.
Yeah.
Like almost industry wide. And it wasn't just that. It was, you know, a lot of people complained, I don't have room for this. Like that was the simple complaint, is like, you can't make an experience like that because I don't have enough room to enjoy it. Valid point. But back to your point, Zim, like, there's a whole world of game design there that isn't being explored because people are scared to do that thing because they get yelled at for not having traditional locomotion modes, right? Anyways, I just wanted to call out the template. I thought it looked cool for all of those reasons. And the other thing I played recently was Ayahuasca Cosmic Journey.
Nice choice.
Zim's gonna love this.
Yeah.
Yeah, for the longest time I've thought, like, you know, a DMT simulation or some kind of spiritual chemical simulation in VR would be really great to give people like an overview effect or, you know, some kind of internal peace. Like, it's a good technology for that. And this is like the closest thing I've seen to like a really good representation of that kind of experience and trip. And the visuals are really astounding. And just the production quality itself is really well done. There's some bugs in it, of course, but you should check it out. It's a worthwhile little journey. You don't do anything in it. You just kind of move through it, but it's cool.
Yeah.
And it's available on Steam, isn't it? Ayahuasca.
Yes.
Good luck spelling that.
Yeah. I think someone in the chat spelled it out actually, so that should help you out if you're looking.
But I'm going to recommend it. So Denny, I feel bad because I've recommended this to, I think, Kenneth Bai recently, and he said he'd done it. But if you really want to get into that kind of Om state, Sound Self is a really interesting lo-fi engagement. Have you done that yourself?
I have. I'm sorry. That was actually shortly before that one. I've always kind of picked those ones out, but don't have a lot of time to play them. But Sound Self was great. I did it twice. And yeah, it's really interesting seeing how the visuals change based on your tonality as you're going om and you're humming along, and you get these weird reverberations and you're wondering, did I make that sound, or is it like, what is it feeding back to me? And yeah, it's really, really, really interesting. It's like those two things are like touching on the edge of what could be possible in VR if somebody just pushed it a bit further, had a bit more money, and could take that to a whole other level. Because I do think it could induce some serious trance states that would be very interesting.
I think it could help. You made this point, but I think it could help people. I really do, because there was kind of a level of calm I reached in that. But you know, Sound Self's a little bit clunky. Ayahuasca is very pretty, but kind of a short ride. Yes. And not very dynamic. I wish those two would get together and have a VR baby.
You know? Totally, I agree.
And especially like apps like that, they're needed right now. You know, people need that kind of mind space to clear and get away from the real world a little bit, for sure. Absolutely. So maybe we can read out some suggestions from the chat, see what they've been up to this week.
Yes. So we have G119 who played Sail on SideQuest, and he says it's an open world pirate game that is now in development. That sounds very interesting.
Oh,
yeah, that looks cool, actually.
Has anyone tried this yet?
What's it called? Just Sail.
No.
Sail. Yeah, Sail.
Not yet. I heard of it, but.
Well, it's the best name ever. You know what to expect, right? I think Pirates of, would be a problem in this case, but.
Well, Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah, exactly.
If it's the one I'm thinking of, it's been in development for at least a year, and the last thing they showed of it was graphically it looked very, very impressive, but I haven't heard anything since.
Well, apparently you can now check it out. Then we have Factory Life, who dove into Wardust, Standout, and my favorite, Iron Man on PlayStation VR. We have D1360, who has been beating notes on Linkin Park, because that's now the newest DLC on Beat Saber. We have Max Fernandez, who played lots of Onward and Population 1 that is still in beta. Hopefully it will come out this year. Did they talk about a launch date, a release date?
Not yet.
Well, this year would be a good moment to start rolling it out, I would say. But who knows? Time will tell.
Population 1 scares me as a title now, anyway.
Yeah, I see what you did there. Then we have Kevin, who tried Fox Machine for the first time, and he says that he's very grateful for the fact that we suggested this title, I think last week. Yeah.
We've definitely mentioned it recently on the show. Yeah, it's a hidden gem.
I don't know how we got to mention this, but we did. Yeah. And then, because there was a new update. They updated it. That's why.
That's right. Yeah. I covered it in releases. Yeah.
Yes. You see, Zim is rescuing us again with some good content. And then last but not least, we have Pyro, who played Skyrim, never gets old. Can't wait to play it on PlayStation 6.
That's the only way to go on holiday nowadays.
PlayStation 8 probably as well, on the PlayStation VR 6. And he bought Timestall using the Oculus Store credit. Now, Timestall is like this hidden gem where you get to work on a space Titanic, and you can you have to do missions in slow motion. But it's so good. I feel like almost no one who owns a Quest knows that this title is around.
It's nice. I think that's the main thing is it's a nice title. When you play Astrobot and it's friendly, you're not shooting things. Sorry, Denny. But you're not shooting things with a pistol or whipping them with a pistol. It's nice, But it's just like one of those ones that, like Mike said, in this time, you kind of want things that just make you feel good, and it makes you feel good. It's got a nice mechanic. It's cutesy.
Yeah, but in general, Force Field, who made this game, also made the Anne Frank experience.
Coaster Combat as well.
Coaster Combat. That's not necessarily a very relaxing one to check out, especially when you get chased by the Yeti. But there is one more title that they made where you can travel the world. I forgot the National
Geographic.
National Geographic. That's also a very relaxing experience and very undervalued, I would say. So just Google Force Field Entertainment. You get some really good games and experiences. So there you go, Mike.
Nice. Well, let's jump straight into the news then this week. And the first bit of news we've got is about Oculus Connect 7, although it's no longer called Oculus Connect anymore. It's now called Facebook Connect. For those that don't know... Right? Yeah, I know, right? We'll touch on that shortly. But for those that are not aware, Oculus Connect is a yearly event generally held in San Jose, California. And it's where sort of Oculus host game developers, content creators like us, news outlets, and basically brings all these people who have a passion for virtual reality together under one roof. I've been to the last 3 Connects, covered stuff from the show floor, and it's always been like a highlight of my year. I always really enjoy it. And it's not necessarily because of new hardware or necessarily new games, but it's just being able to meet up with like-minded people who share the same passion and enthusiasm that you do, and being able to talk about something that we love. And that's always amazing.
There's so much going on around that event as well. It's just not only the event, but you have a lot of indie developers or something that organize their own kind of thing in a hotel room near it or something. You just get to experience and see so many things and people that it's just an amazing event.
Yeah, and OC6, bumping into Denny, and he was like, "Hey, I've got this new game. You want to try it out?" And it was just on the concourse. No one knew what pistol whip was back then, and you try it out, and then all of a sudden everyone's talking about pistol whip, and it's kind of like the buzz of the show, and we talked about it on the podcast from the show floor as well.
That was an hilarious video as well, because I was there with I think with Lonely Viper, and me and him were playing pistol whip, and you see me playing it, and you see some dude in a Deadpool pistol standing next to me, and then you see just people passing by as if nothing is happening. It's the only convention where you can see someone going completely mental with a VR headset on his face, a Deadpool character standing next to him, and then people not even paying attention to it because it's the most normal thing in the world.
I'll never forget that Connect. Sorry, go ahead, Nathan.
No, go for it.
Yeah, go for it.
Just I'll never forget that Connect, just because all of you were there and trying the game for the first time. But the funny kind of backstory there is we were supposed to have a bigger presence at OC6. A bunch of things happened and that didn't happen. So we're like, me and my BD partner Joe Dunlop were walking around. We're like, let's just show people, just in the hall, right? And little did we know that it would just kind of keep growing and growing and growing, and suddenly you had this huge line of people playing and really having fun. And it was really cool because it was the first time we had really let anybody outside the studio play it to that degree, and we were still a little nervous. Is it something people like?
We even did the F.Reality show on the show floor there as well. We did it outside, I think, but we made that particular experience like one of the highlights of the entire Oculus event.
Yeah, I did,
which was hilarious as well, because indeed it was just on in like a corridor.
But that's exactly the whole point of those events. You know, like it's those things that happen on the sides, on the periphery of the event. But yeah, when you get handed the headset and you try something out, like I remember Guy Godin, who came along to me at one stage. He's just like, hey Zim, do you want to try something? And I was like, sure. And I put it on. I'm like, oh, need a movie browser. And he's like, that's a PC in Canada. I'm like, what? I mean, it's like that kind of thing where, you know, you get that headset demo. You see people putting up these like laptop stands in the corridor. Yeah. Which are a lot of them clearly not sanctioned or anything, you know, and it's just like that's one of the best parts of the whole venue is just being able to rock up, you know, get a demo and try something you've never tried before. In some cases that are just like indie dev things that you probably never see released, and that's amazing.
It was especially refreshing because we got invited to come to Connect to try out new hardware and to try out new games. In the end, there were almost no games. So then having, of course, Cloudhead Games to save us all by showing Pistol Whip, I was like, wow, I got to play something because, you know, you guys were just, hey, we know who you guys are. We know who to show it to. Well, meanwhile, if I wanted to try Medal of Honor, and I still want to since I couldn't do that because I had to stand in line for 2 hours. So, I mean, it was just nice to be instantly playing this and check it out.
And that was the thing. Like, the two games that really stood out for all of us during the event were Pixel Ripped 1995 and Pistol Whip. And the thing is, like, you know, the feedback that we gave Facebook afterwards was like, hey, these two games should have been on the show floor. Like, that was a big mistake. But anyway,
it's kind of crazy though that Oculus Connect is the last Oculus Connect.
Right? It is, because like I said, it's going to be Facebook Connect from here on out, it seems. And you know, as we know, real world events aren't happening right now. So we knew a few months ago that it was going to be a digital event going forward. So it's going to be all online. And this week they announced the official date and time. So it's going to take place on the 16th of September at 10 a.m. Pacific time. And you're going to be able to watch the sort of keynote and everything else live on the Facebook Reality Labs Facebook page on Facebook Live. So that's how they're sort of hosting the show this year.
So wait, you said like because this year, of course, you can't host any events. It's going to be digital, or it's going to be digital next year too, and the year after.
We don't know. We don't know. Obviously, moving forward, but certainly this year it's digital.
I do wonder with, like, you know, the kind of elimination of the Oculus brand and the kind of experience that we had last time, with already far more attention being given to like the business aspect of VR, whether that trend is gonna, you know, continue with Facebook Connect, because Facebook is also more about, like, you know, the social platform, and you know, Facebook for businesses was like a really big thing at OC6. So I'm wondering if that trend is going to continue now that it's also become Facebook Connect.
I think what we experienced last year was pretty much Facebook Connect compared to the year before that.
Sure. Yeah, because OC5 was gaming, you know, it was all about gaming. It had location based there, it had the Void there.
From Facebook.
What do you think, Denny? Because, like, from a dev side, I always wonder, because these do tend to be, the spine of the whole thing has been dev-centric, and that makes sense. But would you see this potentially going that way, as becoming more developer-centric going forward?
ED-centric or developer-centric? Like, so Facebook for business, you guys were kind of mentioning that you saw a lot of that. I think what's interesting there is I think it's less about business and it's more about Zuckerberg's push for building a metaverse. The whole, I still believe this with Horizon, that the whole end game here is to establish the very basic roots for that thing that it will eventually become. You know, the thing that eventually will enable like full body persistence and real-time body capture and facial capture. And like, they're starting with this very simple infrastructure, but it's kind of deceptively simple because it is the thing that will eventually kind of suck users from the Facebook ecosystem into VR eventually, once the hardware shrinks down and everything's kind of established. So I think if there's like this kind of, this is just theory on my part, by the way, but if there's like this Facebook rebranding happening, I think it's more because they're trying to push into a metaverse It's sort of the beginning steps. So they're going to put more emphasis on the way we communicate in VR and all of those types of things. But I believe that gaming is still very much obviously the focus for them in terms of, you know, what's actually driving revenue and what's important to most consumers. So it's still going to be pretty well balanced, I think.
Okay. And certainly, you know, Carmack tweeted this week about the event. He said that everything was going to be pre-recorded with nice production values. But he said, I will be giving my talk live in my typical fashion. So although Oculus Connect may not ever be the same, at least we can count on Carmack to never change.
Not ever changing.
Yeah, which I absolutely love about the guy.
He won't take one drink of water for 4 hours.
Like, this is one thing that if you've ever been to a Connect, you know, and you'll witness the greatness of Carmack, you know, he delivers this amazing keynote, very frank and honest. And even last year he was running out of time, so they literally kicked him off the stage. And he hadn't finished his presentation and he was clearly annoyed. So he just said, right, I'm going to continue this presentation on the concourse. So if you want to come out and listen to me talk, I'll be there. And he did. And then he stood around for another 2-3 hours just talking to the community and answering questions. It was amazing.
To me, it, like when I see him standing like in the lobby with all these people around, it's almost like Jesus and his disciples. That version of it that just, you know, and everyone is like everyone's like, ah. But he has so much to say, you know, and he's also like this week I tweeted something about him predicting, you know, standalone and predicting a lot VR wise, and then someone said like he's not only predicting it, he also makes it happen. He also builds it. It's insane.
He's also like, I always took Carmack when I first knew about him. I knew about him through Quake before the whole VR thing kicked off. Like, I always thought of him as kind of, you know, your typical kind of closeted coder who, you know, doesn't have much to say. He's a bit of a rebel. He's got like a rebel spirit in him. And the nice thing is that he's quite straight talking as well. Like if something's not going well on the inside, like during the Oculus, I remember 2015, I think he made some specific comments. Yeah. So like out of everything that's scheduled, I'm most interested in his talk, just to hear what he says about, you know, the current changes and what it means to him. He's now outside of the ring to some extent. So keen to hear what John's got to say.
Absolutely.
We should talk about the rebranding a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because from what I understand, it's not actually, they're not getting rid of Oculus as a trademark or as a name. As far as I know, the event has been rebranded, but in terms of the tech itself, it's still Oculus. But I think a lot of people don't know that. I think a lot of people are assuming it's just becoming Facebook face helmet or something.
Yeah, and it's funny because I tweeted that this week. I said, you know, oh, what's next? They're going to call it the Facebook Quest. But like you say, they're not removing the Oculus name, but they are eroding it to a certain degree because we also saw Oculus Medium being renamed to Medium by Adobe. You know, so they are certainly in some areas eroding away the Oculus brand. And I think, you know, personally, I think that sucks because I've always thought the Oculus brand was a really strong one. And I liked the brand, and I think, you know, people in their minds could separate Oculus and Facebook, even though they're one of the same. But they could like, you know, separate it.
It kind of worked in their favor as well.
It did.
And it's kind of funny because like my wife said something to me that really struck a chord, and she said, "Oh, what a pity." That Oculus is kind of getting cut down a notch a little bit, because she said I'd hoped it would kind of be like Nintendo, like they're from the beginning, you know, they're from the grassroots, grew up as, you know, this studio, and then just kind of continued on, and it feels a little bit like, you know, the shelf life has been cut in half, and you know, maybe we won't see it continue, but
it has also a lot to do, like I also see a lot of people echoing this, where it's like, it's going to be Facebook Quest and Facebook Rift, and you know, now Oculus Connect is also getting, you know, screwed over. But a big part is communication from Facebook side, how you announce stuff like this, also how you continue to, you know, talk to your consumer base, because they don't really have a spokesman, they don't have a community manager who people can go to say like, we're concerned, is there more going to change? And if then someone says like no, or they make update videos or do a live, you know what I mean? There you could actually talk some more about this stuff, but as Ken said last week, they make big changes, but you also want to, of course, you know,
I do think that their next headset won't have Oculus in the name anymore, though. And I also don't think it will have Facebook in the name. I think it would just be like for example, like Game Boy, or like
just be called Quest or something. Quest.
Yeah, just one name, and then probably like, you know, what they always do, like the by Facebook, something like
Quest
that.
by Facebook.
The market is
with
still,
Oculus as well.
I mean, the market is still quite small, so you could make these major changes without damaging too much. So if you want to make a change, then this is the moment.
Yeah.
I don't want to see Oculus go, but
we talked about this before, but it's a really tough time, especially for VR devs, in that we live in this highly politicized climate right now, and everything's swirling around Facebook and the complexities there. And then this, like you said, the separation between Facebook and Oculus as brands and kind of identities. And in some ways it's kind of true, because you've got this whole division working solely on VR. And I was saying this earlier, but there's only a handful of companies that can actually bring VR to the masses at scale with the right set of technology, to bring it to the level that we all want it to get to. Almost no one on the planet has the resources that Facebook does to power up VR as a serious hardware platform and sustain the loss, putting more in than they're getting out initially. We've got Valve, we've got Facebook, we've got Sony, and we've got maybe Microsoft. Those are kind of the four big companies that can do this properly. But once you start kind of hacking away at the variables, who can actually deliver this many headsets at scale with a certain technology stack that is future facing, all of the things that they're researching and developing. And it really keeps coming back to Facebook and Oculus.
But also who wants to, right? Because not everyone is necessarily interested to do that right now. Absolutely.
There's a lot of trepidation from all of the companies that I just mentioned in terms of how big they are willing to scale, because they're all willing to, they all have the vision, they all have the want, but they have to see the payback, and not, some of them aren't necessarily doing that. They also have to have the coffers, they have to have enough money to weather this cycle.
I think the only one that can really
adoption.
compete with that is probably like Amazon. I think they're still one of the ones that are probably in even in a similar market as Facebook are.
I forgot the big one, which was Apple, because we've been hearing a lot of rumors about Apple's AR VR device, right? Yep. They are actually probably the biggest potential competitor with Oculus in maybe the shorter term. So that'll be
an expensive term, I guess, if you're gonna buy one.
Because it's not gonna be cheap.
No, it's not gonna be cheap.
Yeah. I'm really curious to see if they're going to roll out an AR VR hybrid device, or if they're going to roll out their sort of first gen AR device on the Apple side. But I also believe that VR is going to deliver the best first AR experience, because there's just so many hard problems with AR still to this day, and like in terms of opacity and field of view, and a really high fidelity pass through camera on a VR headset that's actually got a decent resolution is going to give you like a really compelling AR experience. We don't currently have that hardware, but it wouldn't be feasibly that hard to do.
Yeah, I just think, with the removal of the Oculus brand to a certain degree in some areas, I think Facebook underestimate what the general perception of their brand is. If you just ask the general public, like, what do you think of Facebook? And I think whether it's true or not, they've had such bad press over the last couple of years that is ingrained in people's perceptions. And like I said, whether it's true or not, they think that way. And I think they haven't necessarily done a good job to change that perception at the moment. And I think that's why eroding the Oculus brand is potentially a dangerous thing to do.
It's also a question, like, the people who decide to change stuff like this, are they in touch with the community, the people who actually build the brand in the end, who kickstarted it, and that's where you see the disconnection between the company and the community. Like, you need to build a bridge between that.
Well, we've lost that across the board in VR. There are no good spokespersons for VR anymore. Like, it's become very much a corporate thing for all of them, all of the major players. And I really think that's a disservice to VR in general. Like, you need, because it's still to some degree a nascent market, it's still kind of grassrootsy. It's getting out of that dip, but I still think you need really good spokespeople for that. Is that the right word?
Especially in the gaming scene, where everyone knows who to talk to from Xbox on Twitter, and we have, of course, Shu on the PlayStation side that people love to send their Fall Guys clips to, and and also ask questions, and that's something we want with Oculus too. And for me, back in the days when Palmer was showing off new games and doing live streams, I always felt he was kind of like the person you could at least.
And he was in the trailer. He was in the trailer for like Rock Band VR, wasn't he?
Yeah, smashing the guitar. Yeah, I know. Yeah. But that he kind of had that role, and now it's like we don't really know. Yeah, of course, Mark, but Mark is not going to do the community part on Twitter.
No. Also, just one clarification. Eric Hartley said in the chat that Oculus Medium was sold to Adobe, so that was why they changed the name, was because they were sold, not just the change of name. So thank you for that information. Yeah.
But it does seem like in the last week we've had one change a day. Like it very much feels like a platter of like here's your meal. Okay, you're gonna get your appetizer, and then you're gonna and we're getting all these little like drops. And a lot of people are saying like clear the skies before big event in September, and that's pretty clear. Like get all this stuff out there so you can digest it, settle, and then we can tell you the cool stuff. So I think that's the right way to do it. We spoke in depth last week about these changes, but in terms of Kinect itself and that rebranding, I just wanted to say I'm sad. I'm sad to say that there are people who I know were pining to go to an Oculus Kinect, and now we'll only go to whatever's left after two major changes, right? Mm-hmm. We've had, obviously, the whole lockdown era and the kind of semi-permanent or permanent changes to, how these types of conventions are going to be portrayed and how people will meet in that way. I mean, I wonder how things like that are gonna come back again.
This is a 5-year problem. This is not going away next year.
Yeah, this is not a one.
Sorry, this is my own opinion, but this is 5 years until we circle back around to maybe what conventions used to look like. Mm-hmm. So between these 5 years, we have to figure out what the new way of doing this is, because everything that is out there for a solution right now sucks. It's all bad, because none of it drives organic communication in the way that conventions do, and that's really the most useful part of any convention. Is having organic bump-ins with business partners and friends and developers. It just doesn't happen in the current ecosystem of tools, so it's a hard problem that needs to be solved.
Well,
very true. Very true. So, of course, things that we might expect from the show is, this next Oculus headset that, as we've been talking about it on the show previously. There's images that leaked suggesting it's a new Oculus Quest. So that's likely going to be announced at the show. And then also they might share their plans for augmented reality, like Denny mentioned. And then obviously, of course, Facebook Horizon, which, I would be surprised if they don't launch it during Kinect. I think it would make sense to launch it during that event, right?
Yeah. And launch that kind of Lone Echo 2 as well.
I don't know if that's going to launch at the
every
event.
Every year is like, I don't know when it's ever going to come out.
I kind of feel like Kinect has been, you've approached Kinect like every year, and there are certain things like headsets, like major hardware, that you generally are on the mark for. But when it comes to software releases, a lot of times what we expect isn't what we end up seeing, especially when it comes to Oculus's or Facebook's support of indie developers' titles, even big ones like coming from an indie studio. A lot of times they don't even show them. They don't even do a kind of a sizzle reel like they've done in some past Oculus Connect. So I hope to see a little bit more of that in their unveiling, and it'll be interesting to see what that kind of trailer or showcase, the keynote, is going to be this time around.
I mean, it's not Jason Rubin anymore who picks the game, so it's a total different kind of vibe, anyways.
Mike Verdu is the main man when it comes to the gaming side of things now.
You know what I thought was super weird? That's what David told me, because as you guys know, David is working a lot with the Oculus Go, and he said so he remembers that from last year. They had this Oculus Go business plan rolling out, but then a year later they kind of pulled the plug on the Go.
Scrapped it. Yeah.
So there have been people who bought that subscription and those plans, but now it's gone. So that just proves that something can be at Facebook Connect now, and can also disappear a year later. They can be very abrupt in one plan and then throw in the next one. So.
So that kind of brings us nicely onto Facebook Horizon. Let's talk about that, because a couple of days ago, Facebook released their new trailer for their upcoming social platform called Facebook Horizon for both Oculus Rift and Oculus Quest. And the tagline for this sort of social platform is explore, play, create together. And the kind of whole idea behind this platform is that people can create their own worlds using a really easy set of tools to use without any prior development knowledge. They can create their own environments, and then they can have up to 8 friends and family over to hang out and play in these worlds together. So, on paper, it sounds like a really solid little plan. And Facebook have also shared some of the key features that they've implemented to ensure that Horizon is a safe place for everyone that sort of jumps into this experience. And this is where things get kind of a bit interesting, and maybe we can talk about some other bits and pieces after this, because some people do have access to this because it's like an invite-only beta right now. I think Victor Riddell is actually in the chat, and he's had access to it as well, so we can maybe ask him some questions. But
isn't it US and Canada only at the moment?
I have no idea. I thought it was just a case of applying via email, and it was just kind of potluck whether you got in or not. But some of the stuff that's surfaced that's kind of like an interesting point to talk about is this kind of like safety features that they've implemented. So basically, you have a button on your wrist, which you can use anytime to access a suite of safety features, basically, such as setting your personal boundaries, like in terms of space, like how close people can get to close to you. You also have tools to instantly mute, block, and report players if they're misbehaving in your sort of virtual space. But this is where things get really interesting, and it comes around reporting other players for inappropriate behavior. So they announced a video and launched it called Horizon Safety Video, where Facebook explained what the Horizon platform was and these kind of safety tools. And they explained that your VR experience in Horizon will be constantly recorded in the background on your Quest or headset in a 3 or so minute loop. So it's constantly recording a loop of your last 3 minutes gameplay in the background. And this means that if you need to report inappropriate behavior, a video clip of the last few minutes of your gameplay experience will be sent to a team at Facebook of safety specialists that reviews the footage and acts accordingly. Now, these safety specialists also have the ability to remotely monitor the activity to see and hear exactly what's going on in real time, and also have the ability to record the activity themselves. And anyone, of course, breaking the rules will be banned from Horizon. So I get that if something is happening and it's bad, like racism, hate speech, even as far as like online grooming, providing evidence of that after the fact is always a tricky thing. People don't necessarily realize at the time that maybe they should record this and then send the evidence over, because without the evidence, maybe they can't do much in terms of just a generic report. So I kind of get that side of it. But I do find it kind of creepy on the other side as well, this kind of constant surveillance, essentially, of its users. So I'm kind of interested to see what you guys think of this, and let's talk about it.
Can I ask you a question about this first?
Sure.
Since the way that it's phrased, it's not entirely clear to me. That 3 minute loop, is that only being sent to Facebook in case someone reports it? Or is that constantly recording and sending to Facebook? Because that's a big difference as well.
Yeah. So just for clarification there, it's only sent to Facebook if you report something and send it over to them. So
my question about this, I don't agree with it. I find it horrible, that you can't have aware that you're very private. But how is this difference, for example, from Sony PlayStation, that is also recording always a certain amount of minutes, from your Google Home, that is also recording a certain amount of minutes, and it's actually sending it back. Same with Alexa.
It's not, how is this and in fact, you can amp that up to Fortnite, for example. They record entire play sessions the entire time, and that's actually one of the tools they use for reporting for abuse and cheating and all that. Basically, every major MMO that's on market right now does this exact thing. Just to point it out, so everybody is getting amped up because it's Facebook and controversy and blah blah blah. But the truth is, they're all doing it. So where someone like a Kemp Bai might come in and he might say, well, they're getting a lot more data out of you from that play session because they're tracking a bunch of stuff that you can't track on a normal PC, right? Yep. But I don't think it's as nefarious as that, as easy as it is to kind of jump to that conclusion. And I'm not trying to be an apologist for, I don't think any company should have data from you unless you completely opt into it, or maybe they should even pay you for that data.
Yeah, but I'm on the exact same spectrum there.
But they all do it.
But they all do it, and that's the problem that I have. The problem, of course, is with like you said, like Facebook has so much data that, again, they can correlate that with other data and draw conclusions that probably other companies won't be able to do. But at the same time, just to play the devil's advocate here, what you also don't want is people who have no place on that platform to have a private space there and can do whatever they want without anyone being able to report it at all. I don't think that would be a solution either. So you need to find like some kind of middle ground. And I do think that recording a session, and only if that is indeed the case, because there's always like a little bit like, if you read in between the rules, if that is indeed the case, that they can only see it once it's being reported, I do think that is a good strategy.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Because like it's interesting because getting the balance right is difficult in social VR. Yeah. We've seen examples with Rec Room where it's just overrun with kids now, and it's just completely out of control.
It's adults also, don't like all these others, like Rec Room as well. Like there is some harassment going on there too.
Yeah.
But I do wonder, because Horizon is a little bit, let's say, more open about what they're gonna do. But I feel like almost all these kids are gonna get banned there, because these kids, what they I'm
good riddance.
Yeah, no, that's true, because they're usually like kids, they don't really think about what they're saying. Sometimes they're racist, but they don't necessarily want to be racist at all. So I feel like it's going to be like a chaotic kind of thing going on, because are you then going to ban these kids off? Because the Quest, don't forget, a lot of young kids own a Quest. Yeah, so if you they like, this is perfect for kids. Like Facebook Horizon, the colors and the way everything works, they're going to be attracted.
But doesn't it at least a little bit set off an alarm in your head? Like, I mean, I see the vision, right? I see the vision at the end of the tunnel is let's kind of coax behavior through the rules we set on the platform. You don't want to lose your Horizon account. You're going to be locked out from playing with your friends or whatever. I'm talking again to the population, let's say younger than 20. Like Nadie says, don't always know what they're saying, so to speak. Some of them know better, but anyway. And you're heading that way. But doesn't that also, to some extent, kind of, I'll use the term brainwash, but that's a bit too exciting. Brainwash you into just kind of do as we say, and then it channelizes you into this mode of exactly. And I'm a little bit nervous about that aspect, like what Rowdy was saying. I think that the balance of what they have here is fine. Again, I mentioned GDPR last time. It's not like Facebook is doing this thing out of the goodness of their hearts. You have to be forefront with this. You have to tell them. So why not put it in a video so everyone is aware of this? But yeah, that kind of road, which is like, we've all been kind of sculpted into, use this platform, do what we say, and then they start to kind of usher in these like little wedges, and they're slight policy changes, and then before long they've got control of our en masse behavior. Look at Facebook, for example. The problem the world has seemingly had with a lot of the Facebook cases that have been reported in the news is places where Facebook hasn't intervened. So I find it kind of interesting that they're making their, to an extent, kind of USP, the unique selling point for this platform, that it's going to be better off. It's going to be a more protected, ring-fenced environment from the likes of VR Chat and Rec Room, which are very chaotic, noisy, and really open spectrum. I mean, you put your kids in there, they're going to see and hear anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
I think it's weird though. Like every time we talk about this stuff, we go back to Ready Player One, because I remember Parzival saying his real name. Well, IOI is listening in, and then he's screwed. So I mean, it's the extreme version of it, but you get my point.
To be clear though, like from what we've seen so far, you only display your like avatar name. You don't display your real name in Horizon.
That makes sense.
But one thing, you talked about kids. Like obviously Horizon's going to use Facebook accounts. You have to be over 13 to have a Facebook account. Whether that will stop parents just giving their kids a headset, I don't know. But it's certainly going to be interesting to see how this works, because like obviously VR Chat, like you mentioned, they kind of almost the community kind of moderates it themselves, and then you do have reporting features, but you have to record these clips and send them off, and then they'll act accordingly. But this is kind of like a more a thing that kind of takes all of that effort away from you. You don't have to think about it. You just press the report button and it sends the data over to them.
But don't you see like, I feel like the thought police is just coming down the road on this one. I really do. Well, I feel like you start here where you're saying, okay, do the after the fact recording. Now after the fact recording after a year or two isn't enough. We need to do better than that. Well, we need to start to predict with the data that we've got, is someone going to be a bad user?
Report.
I'm absolutely calling on Minority Report here.
That already happens now regardless of Facebook. I recently saw a documentary on the, I think it's called Private Eye, on the data that Amazon collects.
Sure.
And it's insane. They can almost exactly predict the amount of days that you'll get sick in the coming years. Yeah. They'll know when you're going on a trip, whether the trip is for business, for people that you work with, and that all only from Amazon. They can even track the websites that you visited before you visited the Amazon website.
It's exactly what Elon said, though.
After.
This is
there's so much data that you can collect from people's behavior and draw deductions from that.
It's an inevitable future.
It's not only Facebook doing that.
The big difference is everyone has their eyes on Facebook. Facebook has been, in the news for so many times in so many bad ways. That's why everyone is constantly, Facebook is doing this. Tell us more.
And again, I'm not saying that's a good thing, and I think people should be aware of that. But I think people need to be aware that it's I see. This is something. I mean, data is the new oil, like they say. Like data is being collected by every single company, but it's the extent that companies like Amazon and like Facebook are doing it that it becomes scary. It is.
There's two things about this specific thing. Like, I find VR chat and Rec Room and stuff like that, those things are almost unusable to me. Like I've been in them and I've tried to return to them many times, but for many reasons, and usually it's user behavior, they're completely unusable, or it's a miserable experience just in general. So I get the kind of design philosophy behind what they're trying to do. Mm-hmm. Like if you take it at face value and you treat it as an innocent thing, I get why they're instituting that type of policing, because they don't want it to turn into those two things, which obviously, they're popular, but they're also like, unless you're like a smarmy teenager, they're not something you want to do very often.
Those communities will will jump into Facebook Horizon in the end.
Yeah, and get banned because there's an actual policing force there. But but then the other side of this is like the coming metaverse wars. But this is like, over the next, let's say 10 years. So let's say Apple becomes the new big competitor to Facebook because they're the only ones that could compete at scale like that. And they have their own walled garden, and they will have their own police, and they will have their own thing, and then maybe there'll be another metaverse that is completely open source. This is the rebel version of the metaverse. And I could see that weird dichotomy happening, so it would be very Ready Player One.
I think you're absolutely right, because I think after this people will crave an open platform, and I think that's the thing. Like if a competitor can crack that, make some hardware, but just their selling point is this is open and free platform, it will certainly attract some people that don't like this move.
But the problem with that is, and this is the same thing as what happened with the internet in general. For example, Google is not showing you all of the websites that are out there. You have a dark internet as well, a dark web as well, where you can, all of that stuff that you find on there, you will never find it if you type it into Google, because Google is specifically not showing you those websites. That's also a certain form of, like, if you want to call it social engineering, or a certain form of like policing to prevent people from visiting those kind of websites. Is that a good thing? To an extent, yes, but you can find pro and contra arguments for that in both ways.
But even on their own platform, can Rec Room, VR Chat, Altspace, any others still coexist next to Facebook Horizon? Because I'm sure that Facebook wants everyone to be in that one, metaverse that we call it. Then Rec Room and VR, they all have to go, because those are competitors right now on Oculus, their own platform.
They're not gonna survive. I don't think they're going to survive what Facebook is going to do with Horizon. I think they're going to keep adding so much value to the product that people just inevitably go there. It might take some time, but
I think kids can stay in Rec Room as far as I'm concerned. They can stay there.
I really do think it is. I think it's the expanding balloon strategy, where you put in a small balloon into the room, and you're like, it's not so bad, right? And as it expands and expands and expands, the competition gets overrun, pushed out the door, and you've only got one unified platform left. But
it's kind of like the inevitable like conclusion to capitalist society. Like basically these are new countries. These new metaverses are completely new countries with their own rules and their own laws, and like that's where we're headed, which is it's both freaky as hell and super exciting. I get excited because that the futurist in me wants to see what that looks like, and wants all the drama associated with it, quite frankly, because I think it's fascinating, like the whole thing. So
one thing I want to touch on as well before we move on is that Ben Lang from Road to VR, he did a really interesting article about this and sort of just said one thing that really stuck out in my mind is like if you know going into Horizon that you're constantly being recorded, they've got the ability to monitor and record you and watch you at any given point if someone reports you as an individual. Does that then change the way you behave and act? And does it stifle potentially what you might say in an experience like that?
Yeah, that's true in normal society too.
I think this again goes back to the same kind of conversation we had before. I mean, you're probably living your lives away, and your phone's monitoring you. And I like that Denny mentioned Fortnite. It was not too long ago. I think it was Fortnite and a couple of other major games. Like they were looking to kind of out like terrorist rings in that by essentially monitoring and surveilling these major game platforms because terrorist factions were using it as a kind of a safety kind of technology means. It's like, oh, let's get together for a game and we can talk about strategy and you can openly say bomb, 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 and nobody's caring because you're not doing it over a telephone line. So I think that to some extent that surveillance, particularly government surveillance and other kind of bodies as well, in terms of the big corporations listening in, that's just a part of our existence now. It has been for 20 odd years. I think we have to kind of get used to that fact. And putting the can't buy hat on, I think again it's just going to come down to keeping your voice and pressing those people who represent your voice, whether that be representatives in a local political party, your local regulators or whatever, to help keep the companies in check. But to Denny's point, it really looks like these global entities and the internet at large has formed into new. It's almost like having another planet that people have stepped off to because it's no longer bounded by these physical territories. And I think if anything, 2020 has only helped push the world in that direction. So actually the cards are playing out in Facebook's favor right now.
I can't even imagine how much money is being poured in from corporations across the planet into our new remote way of living. Just as a general statement. So this absolutely ties into the importance of a potential metaverse and the kind of impact it actually will have. And yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It is crazy. We've got like Victor Riddell in the chat who's had access to the invite-only beta, and some of the things that he's mentioned in the chat, I'll read them out. He says there's a big focus on social VR without the troublesome stuff, kid swarms, inappropriate content behavior. This comes with more monitoring that you would have experienced in existing social VR apps. He also says the interaction design of the world creation tools is superb. The visual scripting is the most accessible I've experienced. Super mass market focused product. And then the final comment is, from a creator perspective, Horizon is a dedicated mobile VR game making tool I can take anywhere as I create using the Quest. I have zero coding experience and I was able to I was up and building games in 2 weeks. And I think, like what we touched on earlier with the devouring in VR chat, it's going to be completely possible in Horizon. So we could see these future budding VR developers of the future creating their first games and worlds in Horizon within the next sort of few months or so, when hopefully it gets released, which I wouldn't be surprised happens during Facebook Connect, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. We've got 3 more weeks to wait.
I'm very glad that it is, like, to see that game maker engine in the platform standard social experience is fantastic, because I think for people who have to go through the problem solving of game creation, storytelling, all the creative aspects that are pulled out of you in going through that, if you get that even at a middle age, right? Like if you get that young age or middle age, it can really change your direction if you really get an appetite for that. But getting access to those tools kind of at a base level is really important. And I don't think that maybe Rec Room has gotten the closest I've seen, but certainly VR chat isn't easy to go and develop like what we played, which is quite complex and takes a lot of behind the scenes work. But if something is setting you up with those starter tools, I think that's a positive, at least one silver lining on this, Cloud.
Yeah. It will be super interesting to track this over the next coming months and years and see how where this goes and how this goes and how the community reacts, and if they're just reaching for a community beyond the enthusiasts and it just goes for the wider market that don't necessarily care about Facebook branding.
Yeah.
I do think we should maybe move on.
Yeah, we should.
We're gonna hit the 2-hour mark if we keep on going like this.
We should. So next up, let's talk about Medal of Honor. So if you caught the Gamescom opening night live stream from Jeff Keighley this week, we had a few interesting VR announcements from the show. We saw some more footage of Star Wars Squadrons, which looks amazing. I'm so excited for that game. Although the footage did kind of confirm that I do think it's going to be really intense, and I don't think maybe people are talking about that enough. I think this is going to be a super intense experience, but I think if you've got the legs for it, you're going to have the best time ever, and I think it's going to be incredible. Thankfully, we don't have that much longer to wait for that. We also got a tease of a new Sam & Max game, which took me completely by surprise.
So random.
Like if you're, if you lived in the era of the sort of early 90s, you probably played a point and click Sam & Max game at some point. This one's going to be called Sam & Max. This time it's virtual, which is going to be coming in 2021.
Again, I was looking at this. I do remember seeing these characters before, but I had to already Google this stuff. I'm like, who the heck are these characters, and why should I be excited about this? But the humor in that trailer was funny. So
yeah, they're a great pair of characters, and I'm sure it's going to be a really fun game. But of course, the big hitter from the show was of course Medal of Honor Above and Beyond from Respawn Entertainment, and this is an Oculus exclusive title. It's been in development for a long time now. I'm thinking 3 to 4 years.
Dude, it's so long in development that the first trailer that you can find about this game, they're playing with the Rift CV1.
Yeah, so that says something. And I remember it being announced during OC4. I was sitting there with Caleb, Reality Check VR in the show. Yeah, and we remember seeing it together and thinking, oh, that would be cool next year.
Yeah.
3-4 years later, here we are. But it's coming this fall or this holidays anyway, so we don't have to wait too much longer, thankfully. But if you've been living under a rock and you don't know anything about the Medal of Honor game that's coming soon, it's going to be set in World War II, where you'll complete a tour of duty across Europe, and you'll be collaborating with the French resistance to sabotage Nazi operations from behind enemy lines. And certainly from the trailer, this new trailer is very different feeling from the original trailer we saw last year. This feels a lot grittier and a lot darker, and I think it benefits from that, in my opinion. And I think what was also great that I picked up on was from the interviews with Respawn, that they really want to show respect for veterans and survivors who lived through this era, and they really want to tell these kind of stories from this time. So I'm hoping it's going to be a fun game, of course, but I really hope that there's some learning to be done in this as well, and you can really kind of get a small taste of what it would have been like to be in the boots of these guys many years ago who had no choice but to go to war. A bit like the feeling that we got playing the Berlin Blitz BBC experience, when you're in the bomber going over Berlin, that kind of
the trepidation.
And you're kind of you get a sense of that fear, you get a sense of that, you don't know what's going to happen. It's very uncertain, it's scary, but also you're learning as well at the same time. And I think if they can get that right, I think they're onto a really solid game here.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with a high entertainment level. Look at BioShock, for example. BioShock is super fun to play, but in the end, the story is about racism, about all these problems that we have in the real world. And with a Medal of Honor Above and Beyond, they pull out the same. The fact that they decided to go back to, the D-Day, Operation Overlord, and deciding to let you relive that part. It's like documenting history in a new immersive way that we have never seen before. And you need to know, a lot of young generations who are going to play this game, they never lived in a time where there was war. So even that there is a lot of entertainment going on, if there, as you said, is a good story, then you can have fun, but also learn that we never want to have a war like the one we had in 1945 ever again. So I'm super pumped. And if you look at the first trailer and you compare it to this new one, they have worked a lot on the mechanics. They have worked a lot on also the visuals. It looks way better. As you said, there is less of this comical kind of vibe to it, although if you look at the protagonist, I did have a feeling we were kind of looking at Agent Blazkowicz from Wolfenstein a little bit, because he was like, Nazi, like that. But that's fine. If there is like a serious part to it and also funny part, that's cool. But yeah, it looks great. I do have a kind of like an arcadey kind of feel to it. I don't know about you.
Yeah, me as well. I was looking at it, and it feels like a little bit like more linear than I thought it would be. Like from the trailer that I've seen, of course, I don't know how the game is, and I know that I think Tyrell played it on Oculus Connect. I didn't manage to do so, but he said it didn't feel linear at all when he was playing it. But from the trailer, and I get that, of course, because they want to show like awesome bits, and those are often in a more linear fashion. From the trailer, it did look a little bit more like it was a more linear experience, or like you're on a tank, or
some scenes that you see, because I'm working on a video right now about why Medal of Honor is great for the VR industry, and why it in some parts also isn't, because we need more competition in the gaming scene, and this one is again funded by Facebook. But what I saw is that, for example, when you fall, like if you watch the trailer, you see someone falling out of the plane. That seems to be part of like a cutscene where you just see your arms, dangling around, and you could just look at all the planes. But it's not like where in Airborne you could jump out of a plane and then decide where you want to land in this kind of like open world style game. But it seems to be more on rails from time to time, where you have like Defector, where you were looking at a cutscene. You're a part of it, but you can't move in it, and then there are parts where you can. So it's going to be a mix of that, because the trailer looks super interactive for sure, but there are definitely parts that are more like a cinematic experience, like Vader Immortal, than really an actual game.
I mean, in terms of the trailer, I think it's a whole like parade of various VR scenes, like the kind of interactions that you can see, the game mechanics that are displayed. Look really fun. I was super enthused to see a trailer sans any HUD. I know that's not an unexpected comment from me. I'm not a HUD fan. I think it takes you out of the immersion. How that plays out in the actual game as opposed to the trailer, I don't know. I suppose there probably will be HUD options for people who like it. But I'm like, it looks like the kind of thing that I felt when I was playing. It was one of the Call of Duties that was touching on World War II as well, where again you were starting off landing on the beach and all that. And it was quite a gritty start, although an arcade experience. But it still kind of landed with me in a really heavy way, because there were certain elements. You lost certain parts of your party. Some people don't make it. It's not just a hero fest like like Hollywood, some Hollywood films have become. So Medal of Honor, I played the first game when it landed on PC, and at that time I would have told you that, it felt really immersive, and I was playing all kinds of those types of games like Day of Defeat and stuff like that. Yeah. I'm really glad that this era has kind of brought us back to that part of our history, to retell it again through VR, and so far it looks like that it's been in the oven the right amount of time. It's gotten the right amount of detail. And again, we've talked about Alex before and other games that are kind of heavy hitters. I'm glad to see things spend more time baking, come out with polish. Like I'm happy to wait and chew on happy little indie kernels until these big heavy hitters land. So I'm glad what they've done with this one so far. It looks very exciting. I think it's a really interesting dichotomy between the people who've just been kind of scared off the Oculus platforms and titles like this then landing that are exclusives.
Well, what's so interesting about this new gameplay reveal is that at the very end, and I have not really seen this that much, is that they say that it's coming out this holiday, so that could be November, December, who knows. And then what you see, it's not just Oculus Rift S that pops up that you can play it on. They have Oculus Rift S on one side, and they have Quest on the other side saying Quest with Link. So this shows again that Quest is slowly, overshadowing the Rift S, because before, when they made a new title like Stormland or Lone Echo or Defector, they promoted it as a Rift exclusive, right? But now it's like, Rift S, we don't know how many people are really still, so let's just throw the Quest in, because that's. So it's interesting to see that, where they now treat it really as a hybrid, where it's not a standalone only, but it's also, this is a new PC VR headset that we also allow you to play, Medal of Honor.
It's going to cause trouble, I think, in my opinion, with that. I mean, having seen that, it's a little bit like misadvertised. There's a lot of people who have Quests who don't have PCs. I don't know what that cut is. Maybe, Denny, you've got some insight in it. but how many people actively use Link with their quests versus those who are just vanilla Quest users? I would imagine it's like an 80-20 or even less on Link.
Certainly from the Steam VR hardware stats, it was going up, the use of Quest on the Steam VR platform. So that's a good indication. And I think it was as high as 10%.
I indeed think you need to turn around, not look at a game that is also available on Quest, but I think you need to look at the comparison between Rift S and Oculus Quest with Link.
But I think the problem was, the confusion was that people thought it was coming to Quest when they saw that initially, and it had to be drummed into people that no, it's not coming to Quest, it's on the PC platform. But certainly, another thing that was interesting was that they announced that there's multiplayer coming, and it was confirmed by Oculus later on that is in fact the case, and that's the first time we've heard that a multiplayer mode will be coming to the game, and hopefully...
That is the funniest part of this live opening I've seen, because the game director was, Jeff was surprising him for sure, because you could see in his eyes, he's like, oh God, now I need to tell them about the multiplayer. And he gave the strangest answer I've ever heard. Weird. I was like, what are you trying to say here? What it comes down to me at least personally, is that they're not going to go for a classic multiplayer we know from Medal of Honor, 16 players, deathmatch, objective-based stuff, or something else. It's going to be some small co-op missions, but nothing major. I think he didn't sound very excited either, so I don't really know.
I took that as a surprise. I thought it was bizarre in the way he answered, but what I took from that, Nathie, was that they were going to segment the PC and VR markets, and I think that there is, he talked about, the leaning around a corner, for instance, and how natural that is in VR. If you think about that from a competitive advantage, I wonder if they would just segment the two and just put, just have them separate, because he did mention a kind of segregation in modes. I would rather expect them to stay true to their Medal of Honor multiplayer roots, because that was very important in the first title.
Yeah, but if you look at Oculus, their history, because don't forget, Facebook funded this title. And I think they mainly funded this because they wanted to sell a campaign to people to get them buying a Quest, get them buying a Rift S. So I don't know. I don't expect it myself to see a multiplayer, but I do want to, because Respawn has a great history of making games. They made Star Wars, a Jedi Fallen Order. They made the Titanfall games that are great multiplayers, and they also made Apex Legends. So they know, as one of the best studios out there, how to make a proper multiplayer.
It has been confirmed that it is multiplayer. It will have multiplayer modes.
But multiplayer can also be co-op.
Yeah, so what we're kind of debating, Mike, is rather the difference between, let's say, your standard kind of PvP, like 8v8 map, right? And I actually think when I saw that, it's one of the first heavy-hitting offerings that have this dedicated campaign spine to it, which, as we know, works very well with a VR audience. But added to that, multiplayer, if they do proper multiplayer, like a Dead and Buried type multiplayer, which I'm expecting now,
why don't you then promote that? Because the guy didn't really say it.
I think you're right.
Sound, you know what I mean?
I think it was off foot. He was surprised.
He's probably just waiting. He's waiting.
Yeah, they wanted to maybe announce that at Facebook Connect, maybe.
The thing I'm really curious about with that game in particular. So I have a confession to make. I didn't finish Half-Life Alyx, and I'm a massive fan of Valve. The reason I'm working my way through it, but very, very slowly. And part of that is because it is an emotionally intense, super dark, something that is emotionally only connectable in VR in the way that it is, where I feel completely powerless. I'm in this oppressive environment. I can only take it in like an hour or two stint at a time, because it's just got this super emotionally draining component to it. Any game that's kind of like touching on the edges of realism, and especially like a World War II game, I'm really curious about what kind of mental toll that's going to take on players, whether they actually enjoy the experience or they're just so adrenaline deficient because they've been taxed so much emotionally that they actually don't have fun. It's an interesting dichotomy.
Do you mean it because of now with the pandemic, where people have they're more loaded, or just in general?
There's that too. I would say in general, but yeah, especially because everybody's so under such a great deal of stress. Okay. I'm just curious how it will actually perform given that the more realistic or the more you lean into like historical events or anything that feels more emotionally real, like it's a different thing in VR.
It is.
Like and it actually isn't fun at a certain point unless you're trying to teach a historical lesson or something.
That's a very interesting take, because when I play World War II games, I don't really feel that. I enjoy it, but I also sometimes cry while I'm playing because there are like certain parts of the game that are beautiful in terms of the story or horrible. It's like watching a movie for me of like 2 hours, and I have mixed emotions, but I keep playing and I don't feel like I'm getting stopped by it. But what you're saying, I can see that happen, especially with VR being so immersive. D-Day, on a pancake screen in the first Medal of Honor is going to be a total different story in VR.
But that mental tax, like I have definitely experienced that. I mean, I went really heavy hitting into a lot of horror titles, which can do that. Like your adrenaline runs, and then afterward you feel like VR already. I've always had this theory that like you're overspending yourself. It's almost like overclocking yourself, because your body's tracking the physical, and then it's tracking the virtual on top of that. And I've always found that the two of those, like I feel spent after VR sessions in ways that I didn't in flat gaming. But add another layer on top of that, like horror experience, things that are very, very heavy, can be emotionally heavy, can be just stressful. It takes a toll. And I've always felt that like VR is... It's more like exercise. A lot of times, actually, when you're playing, let alone pistol whip, which is real exercise. But like the mental tax of it, as you mentioned, not a lot of people talk about it. So I'm glad you mentioned it.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if they've paced the game in a way that lets you kind of take a breather. Because it's important in VR, and I'm sure they had design conversations about that.
It also depends how much they want to show, how shocking they want to make this, because World War II is full of crazy stuff that has happened. So, how far do you want to go with that? I thought that D-Day on itself is already pretty.
But now I want something else. Now I want like 1917, the VR game, where literally you start from the beginning to end, and it's designed in a way that like you're meant to pick up the headset every day and do some hours or something through the story. I mean, maybe not as bludgeoningly as the Devouring did to us, where you had to finish in one sitting. That was pretty rough as it was. But I would actually encourage developers to think about that kind of single shot, single character, forget the loading scenes, design something like that. I'd be keen to actually try that out.
But most games have been built in a way where you, the gamer, gets addicted straight away and you just want to complete it in one run. That's usually how most of the games felt to me, while I'm playing them. So I finish them in like 3 days because they're so good, and then you're done. But yeah, if it's more balanced, then I would be down for that.
So yeah, let's wrap it up then in terms of like Medal of Honor that's coming. Holidays. Hopefully we'll get some more information about the multiplayer mode during Facebook Connect in 3 weeks' time. Yes. I think we're just going to skip the Qualcomm XR2 Ultra Leap news, and we'll just jump straight to the discussion with Denny, and maybe we can cover that in next week's news. It's not massively important. It's just basically that Ultra Leap, the creators of Leap Motion, are going to be integrating into the XR2 chip. But I'll cover it in more detail maybe
at least we got something to talk about next week then, right? To look forward to.
That is true. We've got actually loads to talk about. I've been delaying a lot of stuff just recently.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, let's talk to Denny then about like Cloudhead Games, the Gallery episodes 1 and 2, and Pistol Whip. If you've got any questions for Denny as well, like chuck them in the chat and we'll try and keep reading some out as we go along. But maybe we should just start like we normally do with most of our guests on the show, and maybe just like give us a little introduction into like how you got into VR leading up to sort of getting involved with Cloudhead Games.
Sure. Thanks for having me again, guys. I really appreciate it. I love your show, and good on you for continuing to do it. Your episode what now?
154. Yeah.
Good job. I hope you don't stop. Yeah. So I was working in advert gaming, like doing flash games and stuff for BBC and weird things like that. And I was always a VR enthusiast and kind of a basement VR hacker guy. I made like collimated displays and all kinds of weird stuff. And through that, I met Palmer Luckey on a BBS board. And now I'm drawing a blank on what it's called.
Is it like the mod forums?
Meant to be seen. Yeah. Yes, it was an old kind of VR garage hacker forum. And Palmer at that point was just pulling together different bits and pieces of hardware. Everybody was experimenting with different, like taking bits of this and that and slamming them together to try to find this kind of right balance of a good VR headset. But he came up with this, kind of brilliant thing where he was taking cell phone parts and accelerometers and leap optics for very wide field of view and a single display. And he had put them together in such a way that it was clear like this was an important kind of step in VR's evolution. And he was going to send a bunch of us, I think there was like 160 of us, just pieces of a kit to put together ourselves. And that's about the time when he had shown Carmack the first really rough prototype of that. And Carmack got super excited, and then of course introduced him to a bunch of industry players, and everything started to snowball really, really fast. And so at that time, the Kickstarter kind of started to come up, and I did the first Oculus logo and a bunch of weird stuff swirling around that. And I was obviously dissatisfied with where I was working. It wasn't my dream job by any means. And I just decided to take the money from one of my prior businesses and put it into doing a VR game like an idiot, because there was no promise of a market. There was no this was a kickstarted headset that back then, who knows, could have sold 3,000 units or something. But I'm like, screw it, we'll make something. And I brought in a couple close friends that had worked with me prior, and we just started building the first episode of the gallery, which at that time was just called The Gallery. There was no trilogy or anything at that point, and it was quite a different game at that point. But it was always this idea of like mixing like Goonies and Indiana Jones and making you like this central character in a action fantasy movie kind of thing. And what could we do to enable that? And there was no hand tracking. There was no 6th off. Like you couldn't pitch your head forward. There was nothing. So we started looking. We're like, well, of course there's going to be hand tracking. Of course there will be. But there was no guarantee of hand tracking. In fact, every single stage, like for those first 3 years, and started 2013, I guess, moving forward, we just kept being told, well, we're thinking about it, but like it's a complicated problem. We're probably just going to do a gamepad. And so the company 6th Sense, we reached out to them. We got the Razer Hydra, and we actually had an earlier version of that as well, like a super early prototype that they had. And what it allowed us to do was stick a tracker on the head so we could simulate 6th off and hand tracking. And so we were building this thing that we had no guarantees would ever come to market, because those things just didn't exist yet, really. But we knew, I guess, intuitively that for VR to feel good, you need to use your hands to interact with, right? Yeah. And so we just kept plodding along, and there were so many heartbreaks talking to Palmer over the years and Oculus about, because they were like stoically on, no, VR is a seated experience, and no, it's just using a gamepad, and no. And so many times we had to kind of shift course and go, okay, well, if this is gamepad, we even built a gamepad version of the game at one point. And it felt terrible. But anyways, we kept evolving the game and what it was as the hardware kept growing. So every 6 months there was a new iteration of hardware with some kind of new major feature, 6th off, blah blah blah. And so
that must have been a nightmare.
It was. So that production was super exciting and the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, because and it took a toll on all of us, because there was no rule book for anything. There was no easy Google search for, well, how do you handle, so when it was seated 180, how do you handle rotation, like when you're using a stick-based locomotion system? So we had to build called it comfort mode, VR comfort mode, which is snap turns, in VR. And we were just thinking about, how does a ballerina spin, and they're always setting their position by looking at one fixed point. How do we emulate that in software? And then once that evolved, and then suddenly you could stand up and get full 6th off tracking, it was like, okay, now we kind of have a room scale space. What do what do we do with that? And then we made something called Blink and locomotion, which accounted for an elastic play space. Like it might be just the spot in front of your desk, or it might be a garage size. It could be anything. And we're like, oh shit, how do you account for somebody walking past their boundaries? Like what visual tools are we giving users so that we're resetting them in the environment? A whole bunch of really hard problems with really exciting journeys to get to answers, but it was always on this 6-month cycle of new hardware. And then as the industry grew, then Valve came in and they're like, we want to bring you to Bellevue and show you something. And so we were in this tiny meeting with Alex from Alchemy, and there were a few kind of the guys from Tiltbrush, and there were a bunch of people in that room that were doing these weird things in VR. And then they introduced HTC. They're like, oh, we're working with HTC and we're going to build this new headset, and it's full room scale and it uses lasers to track you in an environment. And we're going to do hand tracking, right? And this was at the time when Oculus was still on the no, it's seated 180, it's gamepad. Yep. And so we're like, well, of course we have to start putting some time into developing stuff with Valve. And so that's where we really pushed hard on room scale and hand tracking, because there was obviously a path to market there that made sense. And then Oculus sort of eventually shifted more into that mode as well, where they were actively encouraging room scale and standing and hand control and all of that good stuff. Anyways, very long story short, it was just like this constant cycle of not knowing what hardware would actually be there by the time we launched our first product, and always having to invent to make everything work. So the game was remade probably 6 times.
Wow.
Which was really stressful. But the great thing about that was, though, that you had those, because I still remember that very vividly. You had those dev diaries that you did both on your Kickstarter and several other, like YouTube and stuff like that. And I remember I literally lived for those, because I still remember with the Sixth Sense, I believe it was called the STEM system that they were developing then. The STEM system. And you were showing how you were climbing a ladder. And it was at that point that I personally decided I'm going to start a YouTube channel doing this kind of stuff.
Oh, and awesome.
It's really the kind of stuff that you showed, because people are saying in the chat as well, for example, Alexander Meja says that he's being very modest, but Cloudhead Games solved locomotion VR and they are not credited for doing so. And I do share that opinion. I think many of us do, that the kind of stuff that you showed back then in such an early stage showed the direction where this technology could go, and you were really pushing the forefront of that. And I think we all really admire that.
And also, along with the locomotion, you also had the inventory system. You also had this backpack system. If you've never played the gallery, basically you've got this backpack that you could pull off your shoulder, and you can manage your inventory that way. And if you play like The Walking Dead Saints and Sinners now, it's basically the same. It's basically that design.
When we played The Devouring, I was constantly saying, "Where's my backpack? I want my backpack." And then I think about the gallery, but also the way, that's what I remember, is that when you grabbed an item from the table, it just flipped in a way where it was super realistic, and that's what you now see with
the fireworks scene on the beach.
Oh,
that was just amazing.
Yeah. But
sleeping in the tent to get that one achievement.
And sleeping in the tent. So I've got a question, how because obviously it was very early days then, how did you end up going from, okay, we're an indie studio, we're going to make a game that's VR. How did that then transform into a relationship with Valve, where you're being invited to these really niche, small little events with other sort of developers that are creating stuff around that sort of time as well?
Yeah, Chet Falasek. Well, first of all, I want to say something about Sixth Sense. Amir, who, the CEO of Sixth Sense, I have to shout out to him, because a lot of people give him shit for a bunch of things, for being boisterous and whatever. But that man was always the most gentle, giving, supportive guy in VR, hands down. And he helped us on our way to many conventions early on, and he would give us booth space for free and made a lot of really important introductions for us. And Sixth Sense provided the original technology for hand tracking that I actually honestly thought would carry over into other partnerships. I thought it would have been a part of Oculus or maybe even Valve. They all came up with their own solutions. But just shout out to Sixth Sense and Amir, because they did a lot for Cloudhead early on. Anyways, Chet Falasek, who was at Valve at the time and kind of like VR's cheerleader there, he was at a convention and I was showing off one of the first earlier versions of the gallery with 6 Sense hand tracking, and it was seeded at that time, I think. But so you had kind of 3'd off in hands. So there was snap turns and all that kind of stuff happening. And Chet came, and I didn't actually know who Chet was at the time, but he came and tried the demo and he played it, and he was kind of silent through the whole thing and doing his thing. And then afterwards he said, "That's the first VR experience I've played where I haven't felt sick." And he was super impressed with that part of it, that aspect of it, and also because he was interacting with objects, and he's like, "We should talk." And that's kind of how it started. And so Valve was kind of like looking for developers that were pushing the edges that way so that they could eventually show the first sort of demo and prototype of the Vive at that time. So we ended up building like a room scale demo for the Vive it was actually a really cool demo set in the earlier world of the gallery on this weird elevator, and there was this giant rock monster. There's a video of it out there.
I've been running it.
Yeah. And it was a really, really fun experience to do that, but the timeline was ridiculous. And at that time we were using the prototype Vive. I don't know if you guys have probably seen.
Oh,
this is cool.
Yeah, this is awesome.
This is going to be awesome. Oh wow, look at that!
Holy shit!
That is like a proper relic. That is.
Yeah, I got to put this in glass.
For our audio listeners, you've got the front of a Vive looks like it melted down another half. I've never seen this
it's like
version.
They have a nose module.
Yeah.
Wow, that is awesome.
What's at the back? There's like a plate at the back as well.
So it's because it's 2 cell phones hung vertically.
Right.
And they didn't even cut the screen. There was no time. It was like, get this done fast. I don't know if I have controllers. I do somewhere. Hang on.
Are they like the sombrero ones?
Yeah, I've got some really early ones.
So this means that you have seen that special room with all those, little
fiducial markers. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then we went through a few versions of these, and what was hilarious about them was, so we were scrambling to build this demo for the first room scale demo, and they kept breaking, like the cords kept breaking, so we would get something working so we could test it for like 10 minutes, and then the controllers would break, and then we'd have to like duct tape it or solder it, and then they would break again, and then we're like, okay, it's working, everybody run in and test the thing. It was crazy.
This is amazing.
But yeah, I'm losing my train of thought. A lot of things happened during that time.
Chet was the one that introduced you to Valve, and then so you've been working on this like experimental hardware leading up until obviously the Vive. So then what happens? Like you've got the game established, the Vive releases. You then release the gallery. Like, what was the the community reaction around the game, and how did it perform in terms of sales? Was it something you anticipated, or was it more, or was it less? How did that work out?
It did really well in the beginning of the market because the market was very small, and it was actually bundled. The Call of the Starseed was bundled with the Vive. It was the second bundle that they had done. The first one was Job Sim, and there were a few other titles in there. So it performed very well. It was on a lot of people's computers. So it's interesting, like we did the blink system teleport and like accounted for room scale and boundaries. And the craziest part of that is like we were developing a way to show a user a physical boundary when they approach the edge of their play space at the same time that Valve was. And so we were like completely overlapping each other because we both knew it needed to be there, but neither of us had it done, but we knew it had to be done by the time the thing launched. So we both had different competing systems. It was such a weird time. But the reason I'm saying that is like kind of the reception to the Call of the Starseed was, really excellent. And it was kind of the first time people saw, how you could engage with the medium in a really immersive way. But it also became kind of a contentious thing because that's when you started hearing people go, well, why do I have to like teleport in the environment? And the specific reason we did teleportation as the first safe thing to do was because, 90% of users their first time in VR would get sick on stick move. And we even had an early portalization version for stick move that would bring in the FOV based on acceleration. But we decided to go whole hog on teleportation as the first thing to do and didn't actually put that in the first game. But again, contentious issue, still a contentious issue. I don't want to do teleportation. I want stick move. But the thing about it is, and it's a really weird psychological thing, is that stick move takes you out of the experience to a degree. There is a loss. Both of them do, but in very different ways. Teleportation takes you out because it's an unnatural way of going from A to B. Stick move takes you out of the experience because you feel like you're in a wheelchair floating through a space, and it's not realistic at all. Teleportation, on the other hand, if you're using a room scale volume, it forces you to be physical in your space. It forces you to physically move around and engage with that area of environment, and you feel very grounded, like you feel like you're in it. Whereas when you're floating around with a stick, you're kind of ghostly. Like the immersion, the sense of immersion and deep presence isn't quite there. So anyways, we've always had that battle, and in subsequent games, when we did Heart of the Emberstone, the second episode, we included a stick move mode, and it wasn't as sticky, like it wasn't as present. And it's a really subtle thing, and unless you're like forcing people to do one or the other, it's hard for them to kind of know the difference.
Yep.
Yeah.
So how did the studio then move from, okay, we've done the gallery episodes 1 and 2, do we do the gallery episode 3? How did that then end up getting abandoned potentially, and then moving on to like pistol whip? How did that concept come about?
Abandoned?
Or was it abandoned? Or what happened there? Maybe you can tell us.
Yeah, I won't go all into it all here. It would be great to talk about it in depth another time. But obviously, the way that the market, when we look at the VR market in general, it's the best way to think about it is to like transpose the PC flat screen gaming market onto the VR market and go, okay, so if your popular genres are like first person shooter, horror, action, adventure, puzzle solving, what are those percentages actually break down into? So like you might have like a really high first person shooter percentage, like it's like 70% of the market, that's what they want, and then everything else distills down. So by the time you get down to like a puzzle solving adventure game, it's like 10% of the market.
Yeah.
So in PC, you can do a really great business making adventure games if you do something quality and you get it out there. There's millions and millions and millions of adventure gamers that would love your game. We did that in VR as our first game, and so there's 10% of the active user base in VR, which is very small, very, very small. It's, back then it was, was it 1 million? Was it a bit more? Like it was a very, very small group. So your costs for production, because we tried to make these like pretty high production value experiences for a small team. Like we were a very, very tiny team. But anyways, the economics of it just aren't there. Like it's not that the people that want to play adventure games aren't buying the game. They all did, but it was only 10% of the market, because that's the 10% that want to buy your game. So you're talking very, very low numbers. So when moving into episode 3, and we had planned out a pretty big tranche of work for episode 3, and it also included kind of going back and revisiting episode 1 and 2 and doing kind of like a gold version of those products, and then kind of bumping them up to modern standards. So it would have kind of rounded out everything, and that's still not off the table, by the way. It's just that when looking at the market and where the market was, and to understand this, you kind of have to go back to 2018, 2019. In 2018 and 2019, the VR market in general was in serious shit. Yeah. Like it was in serious trouble. I'm a fanboy through and through, but we were running on like a 6-month burn. We had 6 months, and a lot of our peers in the industry were doing worse and starting to shut down. The markers we were looking for, honestly, were we knew that Valve was going to release their new headset. We had early access to the the Index, and we knew that Oculus was going to release the Quest. And we're like, these two products are addressing most of the problems and concerns that consumers had with VR.
Yeah.
So if those two products don't actually get us over the hill in terms of adoption, then we probably have to pivot or get out of the industry. But knowing this, we're like, okay, what's going to suit something like the Quest? You know, what, like just in terms of, you know, what's the graphic fidelity? It has to be something that people can understand within 30 seconds. It should be a tool to onboard new users to VR. Like it's got to do a bunch of things right, and it's got to be simple. And because we went down the rabbit hole the entirely different way, you know, we had climbing and deep interactions and all this shit. And we're like, well, in the end, what was it good for? I mean, sure, it inspired some people to do some things, but it didn't actually benefit our studio financially.
But isn't that challenging to go from, well, you know, the gallery to something that is pistol whip? As you said, it's simpler in its way of how you approach it. So you must have been kind of like, okay, the whole think process needs to be different for this one.
Yes, it was difficult, but it was in some ways really liberating, because we knew that if we focused on a simple thing, it would get us somewhere better contextually, just in terms of, so the design challenge changed from, can we build a game that uses one button? And can we also build a game where we don't have to tell you how to move your body? Can we make it so that your lizard brain instinctively tells you how to move because you're terrified of being shot or hitting a wall or whatever? So it all kind of bubbled up from that premise, like something that we don't really have to explain. It's one button. You could throw your grandparent into it; they would get it intuitively, instantly. And so that was the design philosophy going into Pistol Whip, which actually is harder than it sounds. And the really tough thing about it was, we're like, you know what? Locomotion is such a contentious issue. Screw it. We're not even gonna mentally task the user to think about locomoting, like at all. So how do we do that? And so we started working really hard at what is the constant forward velocity that we can safely get away with that won't make people sick. How do we focus a user's attention in the space so that they are not constantly side strafing or looking behind them? There's a lot of deep complexity in the environments themselves in terms of how much visual stimuli are in the textures and in the geo. That actually had an influence on how sick it made people. We had a small test group of like maybe 50 people come through, and we were constantly polling like, what was your comfort level, right? We're the worst judges of that because we're in VR all the time.
Yeah.
But getting new people in, it was a really fascinating thing. So we ended up dialing in all these really weird little perceptual factors that made traveling down a constant hallway and hiding the start-stop moments and all of that, all those little tricks feel good for like 99% of people. We've had maybe like 3 comments from, you know, thousands and thousands of players saying that they felt any discomfort. Part of it is because you're so fixated on survival that your brain actually this is a theory, but your brain actually offsets the perceptual or the cognitive load of forward motion because you're intently focused on surviving, and you're put to task, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just
Sorry,
curious.
I'm rambling.
No, we love this. We love this.
Chad is loving it as well. They're calling it a history lesson of VR. So that's it's awesome to have this on the show.
But it's funny that what you did bring back too, even that you were going for a total different game design, is room scale, because room scale is a part of Pistol Whip.
Yeah. It was like, how can we knew we couldn't we couldn't go whole hog on room scale like we did in the Starseed, but we're like, well, how do we force a user to move their body as much or more within a very confined space? So yeah, absolutely, Nathan, you're totally right. It's like, because that's also how you drive deep presence. Again, it's the more active your body is in that experience, you're so much more grounded.
And the trailer, like the mixed reality in there, it's just, you see that trailer and you immediately get what this game is about. And I think that's what a lot of like VR developers struggle with when they show a VR game, is like how it plays in virtual reality, especially for people who don't have a VR headset. But with Pistol Whip, and especially in the trailer that you guys made, once you see that, you immediately understand like how this game plays and why it is awesome.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I still remember back at OC6 when, these three guys had played the game, and they're like, Zim, you gotta track these guys down and play Pistol Whip. And at that point, you're just hearing, Pistol Whip, and I think they were talking about, the obvious comparisons in the movie side, and they're like, oh, you just got to try it. And until you try it, like it's hard to sell it, right? Because all you've got is maybe a name or a premise to go off of. It's like, you're gonna feel like John Wick, and you almost don't believe that when someone says it. You're like, yeah, okay, maybe. And then you I mean, even in that demo edition, it was like instantly like selling it. So what Rowdy's saying about the MR is, not every VR experience looks great and MR works well, but I do think that it gives it that veneer that is like very attractive and brings it in. It sells it well, and that's the important thing.
And then in the end, the game comes out and you play it on your Oculus Go.
I did.
That's true. I saw that. It works.
Yeah. Well, I was like, I'm always like that. I always like just tinkering and testing with the various, and every so often something just clicks and it goes, hang on a second. Like right now, I've got there's a lady who in Boston who has been having this like 4-month saga with returning her touch controllers back and forth with Oculus, and they're not working. So she's like relegated to single hand Quest games, and there aren't that many that offer that option, right? And it's similar to like when you think about the difference between 6DoF and 3DoF. There are some games, not very many, Pistol Whip is one of them, where you can kind of get away a little bit with going to 3DoF, and you can still have fun. You can still complete a level. You're not going to pull any high scores or anything.
I have a funny story about, because one of the things was we recognized really early that being able to brace your hand and put a controller down made the whole thing just feel way better. But it totally confused Oculus. They're like, wait, it actually wrecked one of the systems because you couldn't have one of the controllers off camera without it causing a bunch of problems.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, so they actually had to do some stuff in their API to enable us to actually just use one controller, which was fun.
So one thing we should touch on probably as well, and we will come back to Pistol Whip, is the Aperture Hand Labs experience and how you got involved in that. Because I remember when the Valve Index was coming out and teasing. I remember you guys teasing a bunch of pictures on Twitter with like little emojis covering the headsets, and it sparked a whole controversy over like, is this the new headset? Like, did you get in trouble over that? And like, how did Valve end up approaching you to say, hey, can you make this experience for us to onboard our new controllers?
Smileygate. First of all,
Smileygate.
So what I failed to recognize was how tenacious and detail oriented the like Reddit community was.
Oh yeah, nothing goes past them.
It was like
stuff zooming in.
It was like super late at night. I'm like, it's so, we've been working on this thing for so long. We were working with the writers from the original Portal, like they were there at the studio. It was a really, really cool project. I was super tired, and like I'm like, oh, it's so frustrating not being able to even tease anything. So I put up a blurred image with a smiley emoji over my head, and somebody like found a few pixels in the corner. They're like, that's an index. And it wasn't supposed to exist. So did I get in trouble? Well, I very quickly emailed Valve when that blew up, and I'm like, I'm really sorry. This wasn't my intention, obviously. And they're like, oh, it's no big deal. They were super cool about it.
Nice, that's awesome.
But I'll just grab it quick. Sorry, how are we for time?
It's fine. It's fine.
This
We're
is
good.
why Denny hasn't disappeared yet, because they were fine with it.
But I remember we discussed that very image ourselves.
We have
it on the podcast on the show somewhere.
Yeah, we have it on the thumbnail. Yeah.
I felt terrible about that. Terrible. I was horrified at myself mainly. Anyways, so they had approached us. They were spooling up everything for the Index, and because we had done so much work on the original early HTC hardware, And they were like bandwidth constrained, which sounds weird. Valve is like the biggest, smallest company on the planet. They've, they had a lot going on. Like they were spooling up to do their own projects for the Index, and there was just the whole software suite that had to be completed, just like the APIs and everything. So they're like, can you guys help us out and build something to onboard users for Knuckles? And we're like, absolutely. And then so we proposed a whole bunch of things for them, like gave them kind of like this design book, which I should ask them if I could release it, because we had a bunch of really fun ideas there.
That would be interesting.
Yeah, but it ended up coming down to the Portal universe, and we're like, can we actually use that license and that IP and build something in that universe? And they're like, yeah, sure. Again, very casual for a giant company.
It's lovely.
And so they flew Jay and the writers out to the studio, and we ended up working with them directly in building this thing. So this is the very, I don't know if you can see it, this is the earliest
holy
version
moly
of that, and I don't even know if it works anymore.
I kind of like it. It's like a micro version of the Index controllers,
but no thumbsticks, of course. It was just like a touchpad back then.
Kind of goes around your thumb, and then you had to seal it up here.
Right.
It's funny that I might have the box of that controller, because you guys once sent me a package, and then when I opened it, it said like prototype Knuckles. I was like, holy shit.
Oh, really?
And then I opened it, and there was like maple syrup in there.
Ooh, weird. Actual maple syrup, not just like spilled maple syrup.
Oh no, let's not get into that.
So yeah, we got to work with them on like how the control. This is the second version that came through, and how that evolved. They had this really deep scooped pad originally, where your thumb kind of nestled like way down into it, which was an interesting design because it kind of set your finger in there, or your thumb in there in an interesting way. But there was a whole bunch of like streamlining and usability things to like. This felt very gun-like originally, because there were the curves were so extreme. So it ended up kind of slowly over time kind of becoming more generic, so it could be used in different ways. I actually personally miss the thumb pad. Same goes for Oculus and those controllers.
Really?
Yeah.
As a
That's
designer,
what I said as well.
As a designer and developer, this hinders me more than it helps, because if I have a gamepad, a touch-sensitive, capacitive pad, I can do so many more things with that. Like I can turn this into so many different things, like really the sensitivity on that is far superior to a stick. I get why they all lean that way, because it's new developers coming into the ecosystem and designing for the first time. This is more approachable to them, and they get it. But as a VR guy, I'm like, it feels like a step backwards.
It's a shame, because on the Valve Index controls, that little touch pad that you have is barely getting used in games, and it's also hard to use because it's a very small little touch pad.
Personally, like the trackpads can burn in hell. Like I hate them. Like I'm a thumbstick man
like, I had
all day long.
I'm with my
Steam controller. I had a Steam controller, and I could almost play as well on my Steam controller using the trackpad as I could with a mouse. So I agree with Danny that like the sensitivity and precision is so much higher if you learn how to use.
Are we split 50-50 here? Because I'm definitely with Mike. Like trackpads are absolutely terrible and should burn. The sensitivity and like your motor control with that, I've never found it to be satisfactory. Like the Vive touchpads, for instance, were just very unsatisfactory to integrate with, and I found over time as well, their degradation is a lot worse than an analog stick.
But
you know what happened though?
It depends on the game though, because if you played for Space Pirate Trainer, that's great with like a touchpad to scroll through the different weapons. Yeah. But then others are like thumbstick all the way.
But that's what Danny means. Like the amount of things that you can do with that are far wider than just with the thumbstick.
So what happened, because everybody went with a stick, is that game devs did everything with a stick, and like the reason I'm saying this is a move backwards is because when you are forced kind of to bare minimums, like there is one button, guess what happens in VR especially? It's like, oh, okay, this is about natural interfaces. I shouldn't be using buttons at all. I should be using my hands to gesture and grab things in the environment to do a thing. Like there shouldn't be buttons. There shouldn't. And in fact, that that overtasks like your cognitive abilities in VR. You're blind, you can't see the outside world, you're fumbling around for buttons and sticks. Like that's not VR to me. I get why their games have been developed in the way that they have to utilize that stuff, but to me it's like I would rather strip that away from developers and force them into a different like modality of thinking for VR.
And it's interesting that you know, no pun intended, stuck with your guns through the design process in Pistol Whip in exactly the same way.
Yeah, it had to be one button. Like, just no bullshit.
And so it's kind of interesting, you know, you've then gone through this journey with Valve, you've worked with them with the Knuckles, you've then created the Aperture Hand Labs experience, and then, you know, like Pistol Whip is doing super well. You then release it on Quest. You've now released on PSVR as well. Can you tell us a bit about like the differences between the three platforms and, you know, each one with their challenges? Like, was one easier than the other, or did one perform well on one platform that maybe wasn't expected, or how was that working across the three platforms?
So it was interesting because while we knew we had to kind of go for a very, very low visual fidelity for Pistol Whip if it was going to perform on Quest. So we started at the baseline, okay, well, what can we do visually that's going to make sense for that won't look like absolute crap and could be translated to other platforms. So because we started there, dealing with Quest and PC VR was super simple. Like, well, I shouldn't, sorry, all the engineers are probably screaming at me right now. It was not simple, god damn it. But comparatively, like those two platforms, simple. Sony, very different story, completely different architecture, like custom engineering to get shaders and this and that working, the power of the actual console itself for VR, rendering in stereo at 90 frames a second, all that kind of stuff. Really a huge challenge. So, and also because Sony is, you know, quite an old company and a giant company, there's just a lot more hoops you have to jump through to get stuff working on that platform. And then of course, so the differences in fidelity in terms of tracking, Quest is great. They like Oculus nailed inside out tracking like in a really profound way. You know, Steam VR works great, tracking, you know, similar tracking capabilities, so no problems there. Again, Sony, lots of latency, lots of things we had to kind of smooth out, and lots of engineering challenges to make that feel good on that platform. But that being said, what came out on Sony recently has gotten really great reviews and people seem to be enjoying it, so I think we nailed it.
Yeah, I think you did, because I played Pistol Whip on PSVR this week, actually testing out some haptic vests. And, you know, by the way, anyone out there, if you want to play a game with a haptic vest, like Pistol Whip is a great example of a great game to play with a haptic vest. If with a sub pack, a Woodja, you know, the bass of the music tracks along with the gun as well, like the sounds of the gun, they just work perfectly for a haptic vest experience. So, you know, you should definitely go try that out. And it's interesting, you know, that you've managed to, like you say, iron out all that stuff, because for me, it didn't feel any different from playing it on PC or Quest. So I think you've done a great job there.
That's good.
I had a question as well. Like, you know, what do you see for the future for Cloudhead? Is there anything that you can share with us?
I was talking to you guys earlier about whether or not I should even say anything. There's lots of stuff in the pipe. So there's some really fun, cool stuff being announced soon for Pistol Whip. Did I say that earlier today, or was that private?
Yeah, you did.
That was earlier today, yeah.
Okay. So beyond that, Cloudhead does have a labs. It's only like 4 of us that are in the labs. And we are working on something really exciting for how we do this stuff, how we communicate, but it's done in a very game developer way. And I would love to share more about that, and I definitely will soon-ish. But I'm personally excited about it because it's, in some ways, it's like a mini metaverse is what I keep calling it. That's all I can say.
So Cloudhead Games is working on a mini metaverse.
A mini metaverse, like working legit. Collaboration tool, like so you can socialize and remote work. Is that the kind of plan of it?
It could be used in a whole bunch of different ways. It could be used for just casual hanging out with friends, but it could also be used for conventions and school and work. But it's all about organic collaboration tools that are they're they're kind of gamified. Like it's a different kind of modality than you would get from like a corporation or a business trying to make a communication.
And it's called Cloudhead Horizon. No.
So maybe we should wrap up the conversation. Maybe we should take a couple of questions from the chat, and I'll ask a couple more questions myself. But maybe one of the questions I think is an important one is, especially with everything going on with the community being angered about, the Facebook account being required on new Oculus headsets moving forward. What are your thoughts on that, and also like the community reaction about that?
Like I said, it's a weird time for VR developers specifically, and my heart goes out to every studio trying to navigate their way through all of this, because there's only a few companies that actually have the capacity and the hardware power to make VR a real thing. And so it's a constant like internal struggle with modern politics and who's in trouble for this and that. But in the meantime, we're just like, pretty earnest VR developers trying to make VR a real thing for the majority of the planet. And so my thoughts on that are just that people have to remember the people really driving VR, the developers, the enthusiasts, and the hardware makers they're all in it for the same reasons, which is to bring like this magical new medium to the masses, to the entire planet.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with politics at that level. It's just people who want the technology to succeed.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. And it leads me on to my next question is, what do you think the most important thing in VR is right now, or what do you think it will be moving forward?
Accessibility. I think we've reached a really interesting tipping point with the way hardware is moving. So it'll really come down now, I think, to price and accessibility. Getting people in headsets has always been VR's biggest problem, and we're finally starting to cross a threshold where that is happening. And I think the doors are about to open up for developers in a pretty big way. And I think the next year will kind of reveal that more. But once that happens, like once we get past this just very basic entry point where everybody can afford the hardware and most people are getting into the hardware and finding utility in the hardware, like there's good software in all ways. Once that happens, then all the stuff that you guys and I care about will start happening, which is like deeper haptics, finger haptics, expanded field of view, smaller, lighter, better, faster, all of that stuff, right? So it's all gonna have like a natural avalanche effect, I think. And I don't think that's far away. I honestly believe like COVID, as horrible as it's been, has been astounding for VR, because it's shown people what the true potential of VR is mentally, like in terms of escapism, in terms of like giving yourself a mental reset when you can't go anywhere, or in terms of fitness and a whole bunch of different factors. So I think that is just going to continue to build, quite honestly.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Nice.
Awesome. Any questions
Very
from the chat that you want to bring in?
I had a few noted down. We had actually some questions about the gallery episode 3. When is it coming out?
I don't know.
And then we had Paradise Decay asking, does Denny think VR is in a good place now for developers? And how much of his response is a result of how successful Pistol Whip has been? Would he still feel the same way if Pistol Whip didn't do well?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and that's come up on Twitter quite a bit, like that whole discussion with different developers about what's actually working. So I can say without question, Quest is outperforming every other platform, like by a huge margin. So we owe our success in a lot of ways to Quest as a platform. And it's a bunch of factors. It's accessibility and ease of use and price point and not needing a PC, and like they just removed so many friction points for consumers that platform is performing very, very well, very strongly. So you can't ignore that platform. Sorry,
is there still a place for PC VR for developers?
It should always, but it should always be like in the current market. If you're not considering Quest at the top of your development cadence and like where it sits, then you're missing the biggest market. And so if you have political viewpoints that make you averse to going on Facebook or Quest, I respect that, but you're probably not going to survive this market. Yeah. The numbers on PC are just too low. Like, unless you're doing everything exactly right, you're not going to perform where you need to perform. Pistol Whip, it did a lot of things right, so it's doing pretty well on PC. It's doing much better on Quest, and then it's like Quest, PC, and then PSVR. That's kind of like the slope.
So as a developer, like right now you have two options, or you try to get your game approved for the Oculus store, and if that doesn't work, then SideQuest is still a great place to go to. But besides that, there's nothing really else standalone wise.
Yeah, it's
right.
It's still a very challenging market, and you still have to, like, a big part of running a VR studio is making the right relationships, which is also what makes COVID so difficult for studios. And so, like, my advice to any studio is go through that process, though, of making the relationships. Reach out to your peers if you don't have any. A demo is always the best thing. You're never going to convince anybody of anything unless you have a demo, and that's a really hard sell for a lot of studios, because you have to put money and time into building a demo, but you have to do that exercise or no one's going to listen or take the time to look at your product. And so even if it's just a vertical slice, like, do a burn for 3 months, show them that proof of concept, give them a 2-page document that explains what it is. That's where you're going to get the most buy-in, and that's more likely how you will get on Oculus and that storefront right now. But that doesn't stop you from launching on Steam or PC. Like, so get your thing out in early access. That's still a good way to go, and build from there. So, but get a demo. You need a demo, or you're not going to go anywhere.
Very solid. Good. I had another question here. I saw some in the chat being written down as well. Let me see real quick where it is.
Someone quickly asked, do you think there'll ever be the gallery on Quest?
Oculus asked us that question, actually. It's not out of the question. It depends on how the technology evolves. And like, you guys have seen some of the stuff they've released, maybe it was last year, about like AI assisted rendering and kind of like using the cloud to fill in the blanks. And so suddenly you can have like these super high fidelity PC experiences on a mobile device on Quest. That stuff's really interesting, and that's also something PC developers should be looking out for, just in terms of going, well, my game will never make it to that platform. Don't say never. Like, that's a possibility in like the next few years.
That's interesting.
And then we have one final question, maybe from Stubborn Ninja. Have you guys ever felt like you're competing directly with Beat Saber?
No, Beat Saber is such a gigantic machine. I don't think they hit everything right at the right moment and on every platform. And to do that it's like striking gold or winning the lottery. I think we're a very different game. Like, when you actually play the two experiences, I think they're very, very different. We're definitely in the same family of like rhythm-based games, and we're doing really well. I have no complaints about how we're performing. And I feel for developers who are trying to find that right mix of stuff that will hit people the right way. My advice is like, go through all the top selling charts on every storefront, look at what's actually performing, and try to understand why. Understand what mechanics are actually getting people to pick up their headsets and go back into an experience. Like, the retention is a super important part of what you have to break down to understand why people are excited about anything.
Great answer. Yeah, that is really, really great. Thank you so much, Denny. Like having you on the show, it's been awesome. A lot of people in the chat have really enjoyed it as well, made comments about, it's like a history lesson in VR, and I think it's true. Have you being there from the beginning, you really have this like unique insight into the industry, and documenting it, on a show like this is going to be really important, I think, for the future, that one day someone can maybe look back and say, oh, this is how it all started. That's really awesome. And I think, we should really give you the credit that you deserve in terms of a lot of the mechanics mechanics that you kind of like pioneered back in the day in terms of locomotion, inventory, and stuff like that. So yeah, congrats to you and the team, and we're just, you know, really, really happy that you've really struck success with Pistol Whip, and you definitely all deserve it. And I can't wait to see what this new announcement is in the next coming weeks, and what you do in the future as well.
On an event.
Yeah, that too, absolutely. Yeah, we miss being in paper planes and drinking with you guys.
Thank you so much for all of that. It means a lot, and it's not just me. There's a whole company of people who have worked their asses off for 7 years doing all that stuff, and yeah, I have nothing else to say, I don't think, other than thanks.
We really appreciate it.
I got gray. I got really gray over the years too.
Yeah, I'll be that way soon enough. So maybe now we should pass it over to Zim to talk about some releases to look forward to next week, because there is a couple of interesting titles coming, particularly on the Quest, that you should be looking forward to. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah, indeed.
You've got 3 minutes. No.
I could do that in 3 minutes. I'll take a challenge. So first up, I've got Cookout, which is coming from Resolution Games, which are one of my more favorite studios. 3rd of September, you can dive into a sandwich tale. This is dropping both for Quest and Rift. And basically, it's a frantic sandwich building party title, which you don't hear that very often. So the goal is to feed some ravenous customers who aren't your everyday Joe. So you get a variety of different consumers coming along, and these include mouse-like villagers who enjoy an uncomplicated sandwich, and werewolves who have a meaty bite, and you'll need that stacked sandwich that we all have in our dreams. So if you want to play with others, Cookout is a up to 4-player multiplayer experience. But if you don't have people to play with, there's actually AI partners who you can team up with as well if you want to play solo. There's also a training mode if you are not yet adept in the kitchen in VR, and you can go ahead and
I only use the microwave.
Exactly. If you're like Nathan and only are used to pressing some buttons on a keypad, not assembling a sandwich for yourself, then there is a training mode. This one I'm looking forward to a lot because obviously games like kind of Akron and many other of the Resolution titles have been lots of fun, just loads of like heavy hitting fun. As a family guy, I look forward to any possibility to bring my family together around VR. I find them to be very rich in environments, and one of the things we play on Switch a lot is quite a bit like Cookout. So I'm looking forward to this.
Their number one customer is Rowdy's dad for bait.
Rowdy's dad. Oh yeah, Rowdy, your dad.
I heard he's still stuck in that game.
Was big into bait.
Unbelievable. I couldn't get my headset off when he was playing that fishing game.
Yeah.
Wouldn't let it go.
All right, so that's Cookout coming to Quest and Rift. Next up, we have Falcon Age. So Falcon Age, this is a surprise, actually. I wasn't expecting this, and it's only a week away. So again, on the 3rd of September. If you're not into sandwiches, maybe you're into birds. So Falcon Age dropping on Quest. A lot of you have seen this. This is a replatform. It did drop on PSVR initially, and it's a story about this tribal girl and her pet falcon who kind of grows up along with you. And you basically take on an evil robot corporation that's taken over the planet and has everyone in kind of subserviency, and you take him out. You have this little bird on your falconing hand, and you're able to dress it up. You're able to get to know that bird and tell it to go attack some burrowing rabbits and the like. So it's an interesting experience. I found the PSVR game to be quite engaging. Let's say in the kind of first half, it feels kind of Half-Life 2-y in the way that the story unveils. A little bit of pacing problems here and there, but I'm really glad it's coming to Quest. Gives people something a little bit different. And if you like to play with
surprise.
Big surprise.
I did not expect this one at all.
Yeah, I'm surprised that we hear about it kind of this late in development, because usually through the anguish and struggle of getting to Quest, usually devs crack and finally leak about their struggles somehow.
This is a solid studio, so they don't really need to.
Outer Loop.
They don't need to put. They don't need to put smileys on their. No, I'm joking.
All right. So far that's Cookout and Falcon Age. And I'm going to give you one with a bit of warning on this next one. We've talked about this before. Stride. So if you're into Mirror's Edge and you've always wanted Mirror's Edge in VR, Stride is the first game from Joyway that's looking to bring that to you, and the kind of early access is coming on the 4th of September. Now, it's coming in a number of phases, and hence my caveat. So, although it's a story parkour action game, the first part of that, the story, isn't there at the start. So, phase 1, you're going to get 3 modes. They're going to release in subsequent releases. So, phase 1 has first Endless mode, which is endless level generation and unlimited challenges, as featured kind of in the video. Second, Arena mode, which is more spacious and varied terrain. And then third is Time Chase, which you can figure out what that's about, but essentially testing your parkour skills at speed. And then later on, at a yet-to-be-announced release date, we've got Phase 2, which is where the story mode will come. So they are currently building that in parallel, is what the developers say. But if you're looking for something with a bit of a spine to it, a bit more of a storyline, kind of like what you had in Mirror's Edge, you might want to hold off and wait for this. If you're just keen on running between buildings, then again, September 4th is your time. Experience that vertigo.
I did see them saying that they were going to delay this for a week or so to kind of work on it. So that was a good sign that they were doing it. But like, Denny, what do you think about them doing this in phases where, the story, like, it's not the full game yet? You pretty much buy and hope that they're going to just go for all those phases and really deliver those.
Yeah, sorry, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
The game itself looks really cool. I'm actually excited to try it. Stride. Looks like some innovative mechanics happening there. So I think if like their mechanics kung fu is strong, then they can get away with doing that. Like just release the kind of fun and then come backfill with a story mode. And they're probably doing it, I would guess, for economical reasons as well. Like getting to market as quick as they can and then just kind of adding. So I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah, I mean, especially right now, I certainly have a little bit more heart for indie devs who are just trying to basically stay alive as a studio, in this time. And I hope the consumers kind of open their wallets in that same way for any idea that you think is, even if at its bud, a good one. Okay, a couple of mentions for things that you want to hear about, I'm sure. This one, and in no way influenced by the fact that Denny's on the show, Pistol Whip DLC dropped recently. Yeah, sure. So Heartbreaker, a trilogy of Pistol Whip content. I've played through the 3 songs, and I find them to be quite exciting. More than that, actually, there's water guns. There's this new mod, which is absolutely brutal, which is called Vengeance. So Vengeance is essentially every enemy that you shoot returns a bullet at you when they get shot. So for those fucking badass dudes with the massive armor in the head who take 4 shots, that's 5 bullets most likely coming back at you. The one that they fire plus the 4 that you're firing at them. If you're trying to do that with the beat, like Rowdy has encouraged me over the years to do, and I finally did this week for the first time ever, not just using my pistol like an Uzi. It feels fantastic. But that new the new challenge that's posted, that I think these challenges last a week, and I'll give you some time to talk about this, Denny, for things that I might be missed in this update. But Vengeance mod plus this new challenge, I tried for an hour to beat that challenge on one of the new levels, and I couldn't do it. I was embarrassed to say, but I'm really liking the fact that there's a pivot now. Like, we have been getting these releases on the pipeline to time along the year, like you mentioned earlier in the year in your release pipeline, and I thought that was great. This came out. I wasn't sure what to expect. It certainly is a little bit more lighthearted, although you're still capping people when the little fireworks and hearts and stuff are going off. So it's not so lighthearted that I'd put my daughter in it, but I had a lot of fun. But that challenge mode is brutal. I love the fact that you get alerted when your friends top your score.
Wait, the new baby, you mean?
The new baby? No, I'm not putting my baby in Pistol Whip. Jesus.
Yeah, Vengeance and Disorder. Disorder is a real pain in the ass. The team came up with Vengeance and Disorder. Disorder basically mixes up the enemy types that are in a level, so you never know. They're completely random. So you might have a 4-hit guy instead of a 2-hit guy here, and so for the pro players going in and thinking they're going to ace a level. It adds a lot of.
But you get the score
challenge.
bonus, right? Because that's the way I saw it advertised. So the point is, like, if you want to go for an upper score, you can add this modifier. It gives you the bonus, which makes it more difficult. But that dynamic element to it, I think, is really encouraging. Like, it's one of the things that I've always felt Beat Saber is a little bit like expected. I prefer a dynamic environment, like in a shooter when you don't know where the bad guy's coming from. It's not just timed. So I think that's probably one of the more fun mods for sure.
Yeah, and challenges is something new. We'll be talking a lot more about that next month. But basically, it's a way for us to give you specific challenges that mix up different modifiers, and then compete against your friends, which is a cool, fun thing to do.
It's great thing to draw people back into Pistol Whip. And I've already got a score on all the songs that I'm still gonna keep trying to grind until I get that one clocked. That challenge. Is it that they're available for a week, or did I get that wrong?
There's different time. It'll be variable.
Okay. So it's not just necessarily a check-in every week thing. Good. So those are those. And the final little mention that I'll mention without running a trailer for it is that we finally got news that Cubism VR is coming to Oculus Quest. I don't have a date on this yet, but that is a game that I have been praying, begging Thomas, the developer behind that one, to release his game. And finally it's coming. It's basically a very lighthearted kind of Tetris in VR. It's got tough puzzles, so I mean, it doesn't mean it's easy, but I think it's the perfect kind of thing for people right now, who are stuck at home, nothing else to do, kind of like a Tetris effect, but again, from the indie side. I love seeing that.
And it's a great example that this developer had a demo ready, and now it's on so what you just said confirms this whole thing.
Yeah. So Denny's advice is important. If you're a VR dev or budding, get a demo built. Yeah, get it done. So that's our releases for this week. With that, I'll throw it back to you, Mike.
Nice. Well, I think, we've been going on quite a bit now, a 2.5-hour show. We just can't help it. Apologies. Hope you've enjoyed it anyway. So thank you for sticking with us. Obviously, just a reminder, this is a weekly VR, AR, and MR talk show, live streamed every Saturday on YouTube and Twitch. Show goes live at 7 p.m. in Europe, 6 p.m. in the UK, 12 midday in Central US. Also, check out the audio version, which is available on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Spotify. And hit the like button to show us that you care, and subscribe to the channel for all our future shows. We'll, of course, be back next week with some more VR news, and maybe I can actually talk about Ultra Leap and Qualcomm then. So sorry I had to drop it from the show, but I hope you enjoyed it nevertheless. So have a great week in VR. Thanks again for Denny for joining us. Really, really appreciate it. And I think a lot of you out there are really enjoying these developer insights as well. So we'll continue to do more in the future. So have a great week. Take care, and bye-bye for now. See you later.
Cheers, everybody.
See ya.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.